I thought I was simply dying of old age. My hair was falling out in clumps. My skin had turned a shade of gray that I had never seen before. Every morning I woke up vomiting blood. My son and his wife sat by my bedside, holding my hand, telling me it was time to let go. They told me it was time to sign over my house and accept my fate. I almost believed them. I was ready to close my eyes and join my late wife, Bernice, until a stranger in a dusty antique shop looked at my wrist with absolute terror in his eyes and screamed at me, "Take it off right now." That was the moment I realized I wasn't sick. I was being murdered, and the weapon was the only gift my son ever gave me. Before I tell you what was hidden inside the watch, I want to know where you are listening from. Drop your city in the comments below, and if you have ever trusted family only to be betrayed, hit that like button. You are not alone. It was 4 a.m, and the silence of my house was broken by the sound of me retching. I was on my knees on the cold tile of the bathroom floor, hugging the porcelain bowl like a drunk teenager. But I wasn't drunk. I was 75 years old, and I felt like my insides were trying to escape my body. My stomach convulsed again, a violent spasm that shook my ribcage, but there was nothing left to come up except dry heaves and a thin string of yellow bile mixed with bright red blood. I gasped for air, sweat stinging my eyes. I tried to stand up, but my knees gave way. I was Cedric Robinson. People used to call me Big Ced. I spent 40 years climbing utility poles for the electric company, hauling heavy cables in snowstorms and heat waves. I was the man who could carry a refrigerator on his back. Now, I couldn't even lift my own weight off the bathroom floor. A sharp knock on the door made me flinch. It wasn't a knock of concern. It was a knock of annoyance. The door pushed open and Courtney stood there, my daughter-in-law. She was fully dressed in her silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly brushed, even at this ungodly hour. She didn't step into the bathroom to help me. She stayed in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked at me with the same expression one might use when looking at a dog that had soiled the carpet. "Oh, Cedric," she sighed, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that was colder than the tile under my knees. "You made a mess again." I reached for a towel to wipe the blood from my mouth. "I am sorry," I rasped. "It just came on sudden." Courtney shook her head, tapping her manicured fingernail against her arm. "We have talked about this. It is becoming unsafe for you to be here alone. I was on the phone with Sunny Meadows yesterday. They have a private room that just opened up. It has a view of the garden. And more importantly, they have nurses who are paid to clean up this." I gripped the sink and forced myself to stand. My legs trembled, but I wouldn't let her see me crawl. "I am not going to a nursing home, Courtney. This is my house." She didn't argue. She just smiled that tight, thin smile that never reached her eyes. She looked at me like I was a child who refused to take a nap. Just then, I felt a wave of dizziness so strong the room spun. I grabbed the towel rack to steady myself. As I did, my sleeve pulled back, revealing the watch on my left wrist. It was a beauty, an Omega vintage with a gold rim and a handcrafted leather strap. It was the kind of watch a gentleman wore, the kind of watch I had admired in shop windows my whole life, but could never justify buying when there were bills to pay and a son to raise. 3 months ago, on my 75th birthday, Jamal and Courtney had given it to me. I remembered the tears in my eyes when I opened the velvet box. Jamal had hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time in years. He said, "Dad, you sacrificed everything for me. You deserve the best time left." I cherished it. I wore it to sleep. I wore it in the shower. I wore it when I worked in the garden. It was proof that my son loved me. But strangely, ever since I strapped it on, the fog had rolled in. First came the headaches, then the metallic taste in my mouth, then the nausea that never went away. The doctors at the clinic said it was just age catching up with me. They said my heart was tired. Jamal appeared behind Courtney in the hallway. My son. He looked tired, his eyes avoiding mine. He was wearing the silk pajamas Courtney had bought him, looking out of place in the hallway where he used to run around in superhero capes. "Jamal," I said, my voice pleading for an ally, "tell your wife I am fine. It was just a bad dinner." Jamal rubbed the back of his neck. He didn't step forward to help me either. He stayed on Courtney's side of the threshold. "Pop, listen to her," Jamal said softly. "You are not fine. You are getting worse every week. Yesterday at the bank, your hand was shaking so bad you couldn't even sign the check for the utility bill. The teller had to call me. That was a spasm, I defended myself, though I knew he was right. My hands felt numb, like I was wearing thick gloves. It is not just a spasm, Cedric, Courtney cut in, her voice sharp now. It is cognitive decline. You are forgetting things. You are losing motor function. We are just trying to protect you. And honestly, we are trying to protect this house. You left the stove on last week. What if you burn the place down? I looked at them. My son, a man I raised to be strong, standing behind a woman who treated him like a pet. And Courtney, a woman who had never worked a day of hard labor in her life, talking about protecting my house. This wasn't just any house. This was a 3-story Victorian in the historic district. Bernice and I bought it in 1980, when this neighborhood was rough, when nobody wanted to live here. We scraped every penny. I worked double shifts. Bernice took in sewing. We restored the woodwork ourselves. We planted the oak tree in the back. Now, the neighborhood was trendy. Coffee shops and yoga studios had replaced the corner stores. Developers were knocking on doors every day offering cash. My house, the house Bernice died in, was now worth over $2 million, and Courtney knew it. She worked in real estate. I had seen the way she looked at the crown molding in the living room, calculating, assessing. I turned the faucet on and splashed cold water on my face, washing away the blood and the bile. The cold water shocked me back to reality. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles. My skin looked papery. I looked like a ghost. But I saw something else in those eyes. I saw the same fire that got me through the blizzard of '96 when the power lines were down. I saw the stubbornness that kept me going when Bernice passed. I turned off the water and faced them. I dried my hands slowly. I am not signing any papers, I said, my voice steady for the first time that morning. And I am not going to Sunny Meadows. If I die in this house, in the bed I shared with my wife. Courtney sighed, a sound of pure frustration. She turned to Jamal. Talk to him. He is being impossible. She spun around and marched back to the bedroom, the heels of her slippers clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. Jamal lingered for a moment. He looked at me, and for a split second, I saw the boy I used to know, the boy who used to sit on my lap while I fixed radios. Pop, please, he whispered. We just want what is best for you. You are sick. I am fighting, son, I said. I am just fighting a bug. Jamal looked down at my wrist. He stared at the watch. At least the watch still looks good, he said, a nervous smile flickering on his face. It suits you, Pop. Keeps perfect time. Yeah, I said, lifting my wrist to admire the gold glinting under the bathroom light. It is the best gift you ever gave me. Jamal flinched, as if I had slapped him. He nodded quickly, then turned and followed his wife into the darkness of the hallway. I was alone again. The nausea was subsiding, replaced by a dull ache in my bones. I looked at the watch again. It was a little loose on my wrist now because I had lost so much weight in the last few weeks. I tightened the strap one notch. The leather felt cool against my irritated, itchy skin. I winced slightly as the metal back of the casing pressed against a red rash that had developed on my wrist, right where the watch sat. I scratched around it, thinking it was just eczema from the dry air. I didn't take it off. I refused to take it off. It was my armor. It was my symbol that I was still the patriarch of this family. I walked back to my bedroom, feeling the weight of the house around me. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the empty pillow where Bernice used to sleep. They think I am weak, Bernice, I whispered to the empty room. They think I am losing my mind. I lay back down, pulling the quilt up to my chin. My wrist throbbed. A rhythmic, burning pulse right under the watch face. Thump, thump, thump. I closed my eyes, thinking I was resting up for a battle against old age. I didn't know that with every second that ticked by on that beautiful Omega Vintage, invisible bullets were being fired directly into my bloodstream. I didn't know that I had just tightened the handcuffs of my own execution. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I will go to the bank and fix the signature card. I will show them I am still Big Said. But tomorrow, the watch would stop, and my real nightmare would begin. I sat in the driver's seat of my 1995 Buick Roadmaster. It was a tank of a car, the kind they do not make anymore. Heavy steel, plush leather seats that smelled like peppermint and old tobacco. and an engine that purred with a deep, reliable rumble. This car was the last thing I owned that Courtney had not managed to sell, mostly because she said it was an ugly gas guzzler that would ruin the driveway aesthetic. To me, it was freedom. It was the only place left where I could breathe without feeling like I was being watched. I put the key in the ignition. My hand trembled slightly, but I told myself it was just nerves. I needed to get to the bank. I needed to see the numbers with my own eyes. Jamal said I couldn't sign a check, but I knew my own signature. I had been signing payroll checks for junior electricians for 30 years. I wasn't losing my mind. I was just tired. I pulled out of the driveway, the morning sun glaring off the hood. I turned onto Elm Street, the main road that led to the city center. I had driven this route 1,000 times. I knew every pothole, every stop sign, every tree. But then, it happened. I was approaching the intersection at 4th Avenue. The light was green. I went to turn the wheel slightly to the left to change lanes. I sent the signal from my brain to my left arm. Nothing happened. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I stared at my left arm. It was resting on the wheel, but it felt dead. It felt like a piece of meat that did not belong to me. The weight of the watch on my wrist suddenly felt immense, like a shackle pulling my arm down. The car drifted. It drifted right, toward the parked cars lining the street. "Move," I commanded my arm. "Move, damn you!" I tried to grab the wheel with my right hand to correct the course, but my left hand had locked up. The fingers curled tight in a spasm I couldn't control. It was frozen in place, dragging the wheel down. A horn blared, long and angry. I looked up to see a delivery truck swerving to avoid me. I stomped on the brake with both feet. The Buick screeched, the heavy tires smoking against the asphalt. I came to a halt inches from the bumper of a parked sedan. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I sat there, gasping for air, sweat pouring down my face. "Are you okay, old-timer?" a voice yelled from the sidewalk. I couldn't answer. I just stared at my left hand. The spasm was passing now. The feeling was returning, replacing the numbness with a sharp, prickly sensation, like 1,000 needles stabbing my skin right underneath the watch band. I rubbed the area around the watch. It felt hot, feverish. I should have turned back. I should have gone home and called a doctor. But the stubbornness that had kept me alive for 75 years kicked in. If I went home now, Courtney would win. She would take my keys. She would say I was a danger to society. I took a deep breath, checked my mirrors, and slowly, carefully, drove the remaining 3 blocks to the bank. I drove with my right hand, letting my left arm rest uselessly in my lap. The bank was cool and quiet. I liked this branch. I had opened my first savings account here in 1981. The marble floors were the same. The smell of money and floor wax was the same. I walked up to the teller window. It was a young woman I didn't recognize. She was chewing gum and looking at her phone. "Help you?" she asked without looking up. I stood tall, adjusting my jacket. "I am Cedric Robinson. I would like to make a withdrawal, $500. I slid my debit card and my ID across the counter. She picked them up, typed something into her computer, and then frowned. She typed again. Then she stopped chewing her gum. "Mr. Robinson," she said, her voice changing pitch, "I cannot process this transaction." "Why not? Is the system down?" "No, sir. Your account has been flagged." "Flagged?" I leaned in, my hands gripping the cold counter edge. "Flagged for what? I have been banking here for 40 years. The teller looked uncomfortable. She glanced at the manager's office. "It says here the account is frozen pending a competency review. A petition for emergency guardianship was filed yesterday." The world tilted on its axis. Emergency guardianship. Who filed it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It lists a Courtney Robinson and a Jamal Robinson as the petitioners. They submitted a medical affidavit stating that you are, she squinted at the screen, incapacitated and unable to manage financial affairs due to advanced dementia. Dementia. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked around the lobby. People were going about their business, depositing checks, opening loans, normal lives. And here I was, being erased, being deleted. "That is a lie," I said, my voice rising. "I do not have dementia. I have a stomach bug. Let me speak to the manager. Where is Mr. Henderson?" "Mr. Henderson retired 2 years ago, sir," the teller said softly. "Look, I cannot give you any cash. You have to take this up with your guardians." Guardians. She used the word as if it were a fact, as if I were already a child, as if I were already gone. I snatched my ID back from the counter. My hand shook, but this time it was from rage, not sickness. I walked out of the bank. The security guard watched me go, his hand hovering near his belt. I wasn't a customer anymore. I was a liability. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic lights. I don't remember the turns. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the ticking of the watch on my wrist. Tick, 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 counting down the seconds until I lost everything. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Courtney's car, a white SUV that cost more than my first house. She was home. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment. The house looked the same as it always did. The oak tree I planted was casting long shadows across the lawn. The porch swing moved gently in the wind. It looked peaceful, but inside, there was a war. I got out of the car, closing the door softly. I didn't want them to know I was back yet. I wanted a moment. Just one moment in my own home before the interrogation began. I entered through the back door, the one that led into the mudroom off the kitchen. I moved silently. Years of hunting with my father in the Georgia woods had taught me how to walk without making a sound. I heard voices coming from the sunroom. Courtney's voice. It was high and shrill, the way she sounded when she was excited. I stopped. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. "No, you do not understand," she was saying. "The judge signed the temporary order this morning. We have control of the accounts. But the house is tricky. It is in a trust. We need him to physically sign the transfer documents before nature takes its course." There was a pause. She was listening to someone on the other end. I know, she said, laughing. A cold, hard laugh. "The old man is tougher than I thought. I thought the stress would trigger a stroke by now, or the other thing would have worked faster. The other thing." My stomach churned. "What other thing?" she continued. "He is resilient. It is annoying. I think we need to increase the love. You know what I mean. Make sure he wears the gift all the time. Make sure he takes his vitamins. If he is still walking around by next week, we are in trouble with the loan sharks. I need that house listed by the 1st of the month." I stood frozen in the hallway. Increase the love. She wasn't talking about affection. She was talking about something else, something sinister. I backed away slowly. I couldn't let her see me. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to process what I had just heard. I slipped up the back staircase to my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought my chest would crack. I sat down at my desk, my breathing ragged. I looked at the photos on the wall. Bernice and me at our wedding. Jamal graduating from college. Me receiving my 20-year service pin from the electric company. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a man who built things. Hands that fixed broken circuits and restored power to dark neighborhoods. Now, they were shaking. I looked at the watch. The Omega Vintage. It gleamed in the afternoon light. It was beautiful. Perfect. Then, I noticed something. The second hand. It wasn't moving. I tapped the glass face. Nothing. I brought it up to my ear. Silence. No ticking. No rhythmic heartbeat of the mechanical movement. It had stopped. I looked at the time. 4:15. It had stopped at exactly the time I was standing in the hallway, listening to Courtney. Why would a brand new, expensive Swiss watch stop working after 3 months? It was an automatic. It was supposed to wind itself with the movement of my arm. And I had been moving. I had been shaking. I tried to wind the crown. It felt gritty, stuck, like there was sand inside the gears. Courtney had said, "Make sure he wears the gift all the time." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I started to unclasp it. I wanted to throw it across the room. But then I stopped. If I took it off, she would notice. If I threw it away, she would ask questions. I needed to know why it stopped. And I needed to know why she was so obsessed with me wearing it. I couldn't give it to her to fix. She would take it and I would never see it again. Or worse, she would bring it back working, and I would continue to get sicker. I remembered a shop downtown, an old, dusty place near the train station. It was run by a man named Zeke. We served in the same unit in Vietnam, 50 years ago. He was a tunnel rat, a man who crawled into the dark to find traps. He fixed clocks now. He was the only person I knew who understood how things worked on the inside. I looked at the dead watch on my wrist. It wasn't just a broken timekeeper. It was a clue. I am not crazy, I whispered to myself. I stood up. The nausea was back, rolling in my gut like a storm. But the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I would fix the watch, and then I would fix my family. I unlocked my bedroom door and walked downstairs, making sure to drag my feet, making sure to look frail. I had to play the part. I had to be the dying old man they wanted me to be, until I was ready to show them who I really was. The sign above the door was faded so badly, you could barely read the name Zeke's Timepieces. But I did not need a sign to find this place. I had been coming here since 1972, when Zeke and I both got back from the war. We were two broken men, trying to fix broken things. I fixed wires and he fixed gears. I pushed the heavy wooden door open, and the bell above my head jingled a sad, lonely sound. The shop smelled the same as it always did, a mixture of old paper machine oil and dust. It was a smell that comforted me. It smelled like the past, a past that made sense unlike my present. The shop was narrow and deep, lined with shelves that reached the ceiling. Every inch was covered in clocks, grandfather clocks, cuckoo clocks, mantle clocks, and pocket watches hanging from hooks like caught fish. The sound was overwhelming to anyone who wasn't used to it. 1,000 ticks and tocks, all out of sync, a chaotic rhythm that somehow sounded like a heartbeat to me. Zeke was behind the counter, hunched over a workbench with a jeweler's loop stuck in his eye. He was a small man, wiry and tough like a dried root. He was Korean-American, and he had the steadiest hands I had ever seen. Hands that had diffused mines in the jungle were now using tweezers to place springs thinner than a human hair. He didn't look up when I walked in. He just raised a hand in greeting, his eyes still fixed on the tiny mechanism in front of him. "You are late, Cedric," he grumbled, his voice raspy from years of smoking cheap cigars. "You said you would bring me that toaster to fix last week." "I am not here for the toaster, Zeke," I said, leaning against the counter. My legs felt heavy again. The walk from the car had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. Zeke stopped working. He sensed the change in my tone. He put down his tweezers and turned on his swivel stool. He took the loop out of his eye and squinted at me, his face wrinkled with concern. "You look like hell," he said bluntly. "What happened to you, Big Ced? You look like you have lost 20 pounds. "Just a bug," I lied. "Just a stomach bug that won't quit." Zeke didn't buy it. He looked at my thinning hair. He looked at the gray pallor of my skin. He looked at the way I was gripping the counter for support. "That is no bug," he said quietly. "You look like the guys we pulled out of the chemical zones back in the day. You look poisoned." I flinched at the word. Poisoned. It felt too dramatic, too real. "I came about the watch," I said, changing the subject. I unclasped the Omega from my wrist and laid it on the velvet pad on the counter. The metal felt warm to the touch, which was strange because the shop was cool. "It stopped," I said. "It is brand new. Jamal gave it to me 3 months ago. It just died this afternoon." Zeke put his glasses back on and pulled the lamp closer. He whistled low and long. "An Omega Seamaster Vintage," he said, admiring the case. "1960s design, but this looks like a custom restoration. Gold plating, original leather. This is a serious piece of machinery, Cedric. Your boy spent a fortune on this." I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. I felt guilty for suspecting something was wrong with a gift that cost so much. "It is automatic, right?" I asked. "It should not just stop." "No, it shouldn't," Zeke mumbled. He picked it up. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it. He frowned. "It is heavy," he said. "Heavier than a standard Seamaster. Maybe they used a weighted rotor for the winding mechanism. But still." He took a small tool, a case knife, from his bench. He tried to pop the back open. It didn't budge. "That is tight," he muttered. "Usually these screw off or pop with a little pressure. This feels like it has been sealed, welded almost." He grabbed a vice grip, specifically designed for watches. He clamped the watch down. "Careful, Zeke," I said. "Do not scratch it. Courtney will kill me." Zeke didn't answer. He was focused. He applied pressure, twisting the back casing. His knuckles turned white. For a moment, I thought he was going to break the tool. Then with a loud crack, the seal gave way. The back of the watch spun off. Zeke leaned in, adjusting his light. He looked through his magnifier. I waited for him to tell me a spring had snapped or a gear was jammed. I waited for him to tell me it would cost $200 to fix. But he didn't say anything. He went completely still. "Zeke," I asked, "what is it?" He didn't answer. He slowly backed away from the counter, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. He looked at the watch as if it had just hissed at him. "Zeke, talk to me." He turned around and ran to the back of the shop. I heard him rummaging through a metal cabinet. He came back holding a yellow box I hadn't seen in years. It was a Geiger counter, an old military surplus model we used to joke about. "Zeke, what the hell are you doing?" I asked, my heart starting to race. He didn't speak. He flipped the switch on the machine. Check. 1, 2. The machine let out a slow, rhythmic clicking sound. Click, click, click. Just measuring the background radiation of the room. Normal. Zeke extended the wand toward the watch lying on the counter. As the wand got closer, the clicking sped up. Click, 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 click. When the wand was 6 inches away from the open back of the watch, the machine screamed. "Bert!" The needle on the gauge slammed all the way to the red zone and stayed there vibrating violently. The sound was deafening in the quiet shop. It sounded like bacon frying in a hot pan, but louder. Angry. Zeke dropped the wand and screamed at me, a sound of pure terror. "Cedric, back away." He didn't wait for me to move. He grabbed a pair of long metal tongs from his chemical bath. He snatched the watch up by the strap. "Open that box," he yelled, pointing to a heavy gray box on the floor near the safe. It was a lead-lined box he kept for storing radium dial clocks from the 20s. I kicked the lid open. Zeke dropped the watch inside and slammed the lid shut. He threw the tongs across the room. The screaming of the Geiger counter stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and terrifying. My ears were ringing. I looked at Zeke. He was breathing hard, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. "What was that?" I whispered. My voice was trembling. Zeke looked at me. His eyes were full of pity and rage. "That was not a watch movement, Cedric," he said. "There was no balance wheel inside, no mainspring." "Then what was inside?" I asked, though I think deep down I already knew. Zeke walked around the counter and grabbed my wrist. He pulled my hand under the lamp. "Look," he said, pointing to the red rash where the watch case had sat. The skin was angry, red, peeling and hot. "That is a radiation burn, Cedric." He let go of my hand and looked at the lead box. Inside that watch case, someone removed the mechanism and replaced it with a disc of industrial metal. Based on the reading I just got, that was a concentrated wafer of radium-226. "Radium," I said. "Like the stuff they used to paint on watch dials so they glowed in the dark." No, Zeke shook his head violently. "Not paint. Paint is dangerous, but it takes years to kill you. This was a solid piece, probably stripped from the instrument panel of an old decommissioned fighter jet or a medical device. That amount of radiation sitting directly on your radial artery for 3 months." He stopped, taking a deep breath. "It is beaming gamma rays straight into your bloodstream 24 hours a day. It destroys your white blood cells. It attacks your bone marrow. It mimics leukemia. It mimics rapid aging." I stared at the lead box. The nausea, the hair loss, the weakness. It wasn't age. It wasn't a bug. It was a bullet. A silent, invisible bullet that I had been strapping to my own arm every single morning. And my son gave it to me. I felt the room spin. I grabbed the stool and sat down before I fell down. "Jamal," I whispered. "He gave it to me. He put it on my wrist." Zeke poured me a glass of water from a pitcher. His hand was shaking too. Maybe he didn't know Zeke said trying to be a friend. Maybe he bought it from a shady dealer. "No," I said, closing my eyes. I remembered Courtney's voice from the hallway. "Increase the love. Make sure he wears the gift all the time." She knew. She knew exactly what it was. She didn't want to wait for me to die naturally. She didn't want to wait for the cancer to develop over years. She wanted me gone, now. "How much time?" I asked Zeke. "If I had kept wearing it." Zeke looked at the Geiger counter. "At that level," he said softly, "another week, maybe 2. Your organs would have shut down. The doctors would have called it multiple system atrophy. Nobody would have checked for radiation because, why would they? Who gets radiation poisoning in the suburbs?" I looked at my wrist. The skin was burning. I felt dirty. I felt violated. I stood up. A surge of adrenaline washed over me, clearing the fog in my brain. "I am going to the police," I said. Zeke grabbed my arm. "No, you are not. Not yet." "Why not?" "They tried to kill me, Zeke." "Think about it, Cedric. If you go to the police now, what do you have? A watch in a box. They will say you bought it yourself. They will say you are a senile old man who collects junk. Courtney will have a lawyer there in 5 minutes. She will say she bought it at an estate sale and had no idea. She will play the victim, and you have no proof she knew." He was right. Courtney was smart. She was evil, but she was smart. She would spin this. She would say, "I was handling dangerous materials in my old age." She would use this to prove I was incompetent and get the guardianship finalized faster. "So what do?" I asked. "Do I just go home and let them finish the job?" Zeke walked over to his display case. He unlocked it and took out a watch. It was an Omega, almost identical to the one in the lead box. "I picked this up for parts last year," Zeke said. "The movement is broken, but the case is perfect." He tossed it to me. "Put it on," he said. I looked at him confused. "You want me to wear a watch?" "I want you to wear this watch," Zeke said, his eyes narrowing. "It is harmless. It is just steel and glass. But to them, it looks exactly like the weapon they gave you." I understood. I put the decoy watch on my wrist. It felt cool, safe. "Go home, Cedric," Zeke said. "Act sick. Act weaker than you have ever been. Let them think it is working. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they have won." And then I asked. Zeke smiled a grim, dangerous smile. The smile of a man who had survived a war. "And then we catch them. We catch them when they come to collect the body." I looked at my friend. I looked at the lead box that contained the poison meant to end my life. I walked out of the shop. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood orange. I felt the nausea rising in my throat again, but this time I swallowed it down. I wasn't dying anymore. I was hunting. I got back into my Buick and looked at the house on the hill. My house, my castle. Courtney wanted a funeral. I decided right then and there I would give her one. But it wouldn't be mine. Zeke had the heavy black receiver of his rotary phone in his hand, and his finger was hovering over the dial. He was shaking. I could see the veins bulging in his neck. He wanted to call the police. He wanted to call the FBI. He wanted to call the National Guard. He was a soldier, reacting to an ambush, and his instinct was to call for air support immediately. "Put the phone down, Zeke," I said. My voice was low, but it cracked like a whip in the silent shop. He looked at me like I was crazy. "Cedric, are you out of your mind? There is a nuclear weapon sitting in a lead box 3 feet away from us. That woman is not just a bad daughter-in-law. She is a domestic terrorist. We need to get you to a hospital, and we need to get her in handcuffs." I reached over the counter and placed my hand on his. My hand was still burning from the radiation, but my grip was firm. "Think about it, Zeke. If the police show up at my door tonight, what do they find? They find a confused old man claiming his son is trying to poison him with a watch. They find a woman who is well-dressed, well-spoken, and armed with a stack of medical papers saying I have dementia." I took a breath, steadying myself against the workbench. "She will say I bought the watch myself at a flea market. She will say I am hoarding dangerous junk because my mind is gone. She will use this to fast-track the guardianship. She will put me in a locked ward at Sunny Meadows by tomorrow morning, and I will never see the light of day again. And that watch, that evidence, it will disappear. She will throw it in the river, and nobody will ever know." Zeke slowly lowered the phone back onto the cradle. He knew I was right. We were two old men from a different time. We knew how the world worked. We knew that justice often depended on who told the story first and who had the better suit. "So what is the play?" Big said Zeke asked, rubbing his temples. "You cannot go back there. It is a death trap." I looked at the empty space on my wrist. I felt naked without the weight of the watch, but for the first time in months, my head felt slightly clearer. The fog was lifting just enough for me to see the path forward. "I have to go back," I said. "I have to make them believe I am dying. I have to let them think they have won, so they get sloppy. But I cannot wear that death trap anymore." I pointed to the display case where the harmless Omega sat, the one Zeke had tossed me earlier. "Make it look like mine," I said. Zeke looked at the decoy watch, then at the lead box where my original watch lay entombed. He understood immediately. He grabbed the decoy. It was a 1968 Seamaster. Same steel case, same gold rim, but the dial was slightly different. The hands were a little cleaner. "Give me 20 minutes, Zeke said. He pulled his magnifier down over his eye and went to work. I watched him with a strange fascination. It was like watching a surgeon prepare for a heart transplant. Zeke opened the lead box holding his breath. He used long forceps to carefully remove the leather strap from the radioactive watch. That strap had sweat stains on it. It had the unique crease where I buckled it every day. It had my DNA on it. He dropped the radioactive casing back into the lead box and sealed it. Then he attached my old worn strap to the harmless decoy watch. He wasn't done. He took a small file and made a tiny scratch on the side of the decoy case, exactly matching a scratch I had made on the original when I banged it against a door frame 2 weeks ago. He rubbed a little bit of graphite dust on the shiny crystal to dull it down, to make it look like it had been worn every day for 3 months. When he handed it to me, it was terrifying. It looked exactly like the thing that was killing me. I strapped it on. It fit perfectly into the groove on my wrist. But there was one huge difference. The burning sensation was gone. The ticking sound was soft and rhythmic, not the silent hum of death. "It is just steel and brass," Cedric Zeke said softly. "It is safe, but you have to be careful. Do not let her hold it. Do not let her look at the movement. If she sees the serial number, she might know." "She won't look," I said, buttoning my cuff over the watch. "She is too arrogant to look. She thinks she has already won." I stood up and checked my reflection in the dusty mirror behind the counter. I slumped my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I relaxed the muscles in my face to make my skin look saggier. I practiced a tremor in my left hand. I was no longer Cedric Robinson, the master electrician. I was Cedric, the victim. I drove home slowly. The sun had gone down, and the streetlights were flickering on. My stomach was empty, but the nausea had faded to a dull ache. I realized I was starving. I hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks because everything tasted like copper. I pulled into the driveway. The lights were on in the living room. I could see shadows moving. They were probably discussing which real estate agent to call. I took a deep breath. This was the performance of a lifetime. If I messed up, I was dead. I opened the front door and shuffled in, dragging my feet. "Dad, is that you?" It was Jamal. He came out of the kitchen holding a glass of wine. He looked guilty. He always looked guilty these days. I leaned against the door frame, breathing heavily. "I went for a drive," I rasped, making my voice sound thin and weak. "I got lost. I don't know where I went." Courtney appeared behind him. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her eyes darted instantly to my wrist. She was checking the weapon. I made sure to lift my hand to wipe my forehead, letting the sleeve slide down. The watch glinted under the hallway chandelier. I saw her shoulders relax. A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. She thought I was still wearing the poison. "Oh, Cedric," she cooed, walking over and taking my arm. Her hands were cold. "We were so worried. You shouldn't be driving in your condition. You know the doctor said your spatial awareness is failing." I let her lead me into the living room like a toddler. I sat down heavily in my recliner, the leather groaning under my weight. "I just wanted to see the old neighborhood," I mumbled, "before I forget it." "Don't talk like that, Pop," Jamal said, sitting on the ottoman across from me. "You are not going to forget anything." Courtney sat on the arm of his chair, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. She stared at me. She was examining me like a biology specimen in a jar. "You look pale, Dad," she said. "Did you take your medication?" I nodded, lying. "I felt a wave of dizziness earlier." "That is normal," she said quickly. "That just means the treatment is working. It gets worse before it gets better." She leaned forward and her eyes locked onto the watch again. "And you are wearing the watch," she said. "Good." I looked down at the decoy. "Why?" I asked innocently. "Why does it matter?" Courtney didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. The lie came out of her mouth as smooth as oil. "Jamal was reading about it," she said. "The magnetic resonance in that specific model. It helps regulate blood pressure. It uses the body's natural kinetic energy to balance your heart rate. That is why we spent so much money on it. It is therapeutic." I looked at Jamal. He looked down at his wine glass. He knew it was a lie, but he didn't know it was a lethal lie. He just thought she was making up nonsense to make me feel better about the gift. He didn't know she was convincing me to keep a suicide machine strapped to my arm. Therapeutic, I repeated, testing the word. It helps my heart. Exactly, Courtney smiled. So you must never take it off, not even when you sleep. Especially not when you sleep. That is when your heart is weakest. I looked at this woman. I looked at the face of the monster who had invaded my home. She wasn't just greedy, she was sadistic. She wanted me to sleep with the thing that was burning my bones. Okay, I whispered. I will keep it on, thank you, Courtney. You always think of everything. Her smile widened. It was a predator's smile. She thought I was broken. She thought I was stupid. Why don't you go upstairs and rest, she suggested. I will bring you some soup. You need to keep your strength up. I nodded and began the slow, painful process of standing up. I gripped the armrests, my fake tremor shaking the chair. I shuffled toward the stairs. As I climbed the steps one by one, I heard them whispering below. See, Jamal? Courtney whispered. He is fading fast. He couldn't even keep his eyes focused. It won't be long now. I don't know, Jamal whispered back. I feel bad. Maybe we should get a second opinion. Don't be soft, she hissed. Do you want to lose the house? Do you want to go back to renting a one-bedroom apartment? We are doing him a favor. We are ending his suffering. I reached the top of the stairs. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't want to arouse suspicion. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. The moon was rising. I stopped shaking. I stood up straight. I rolled my shoulders back, stretching the muscles that I had kept hunched for the last hour. I looked at the decoy watch on my wrist. It was ticking steadily. Safe. Reliable. I wasn't fading. I was just getting started. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the soup. I would eat it. I would play the part. I would let her think she was the puppet master. But tomorrow, I had work to do. I had to find out exactly how much debt she was in. I had to find out who she owed. And I had to find a way to trap her without my son getting caught in the crossfire. The door handle turned. I quickly slumped back onto the pillows, making my breathing shallow. Courtney walked in with a tray. Here you go, Dad, she said, softly placing the bowl on the nightstand. Eat up. It will help you sleep. I looked at her. Thank you, dear, I said. She turned to leave but stopped at the door. Sweet dreams, Cedric, she said. She turned off the light, plunging the room into darkness. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. Then I sat up in the dark. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. I looked at the watch face glowing faintly with standard harmless lume. The nightmare is over, Courtney, I whispered to the empty room. You just don't know it yet. Dr. Vance did not look like the kind of man who got rattled easily. He was a combat medic in the Gulf War before he opened his private practice in a quiet brick building on the edge of town. He had seen things that would make most men crumble. But as he sat across from me in his office, with the blinds drawn against the midday sun, his hands were trembling just slightly as he held my lab report. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. I sat on the edge of the examination table, my shirt buttoned back up, feeling the cool metal of the decoy watch on my wrist. I tried to read his face, but he was avoiding my eyes. Cedric, he started, his voice low and serious, I need you to be honest with me. Have you been near any industrial waste sites lately? Have you been digging around in those old substations you used to work at? No, I said. I have been sitting in my recliner watching game shows and drinking soup. Why? He slid the paper across the desk. It was covered in numbers and graphs that meant nothing to me, but the red ink at the bottom was clear enough. Your white blood cell count is critically low, he said, and your platelets are almost non-existent, but that is not the scary part. We found isotopes in your blood work, radium-226. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were full of a dark, grim realization. You have acute radiation syndrome, Cedric, level 2. It is not lethal yet, but it is aggressive. If you were a younger man, your body might be fighting it better, but at your age, he trailed off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. How long? I asked. If I hadn't stopped the exposure. Dr. Vance sighed. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 at the most. Your bone marrow is shutting down. Another week of exposure and you would have started hemorrhaging internally. We would have written it off as a stroke or organ failure. I nodded slowly. Hearing it from a doctor made it real in a way that Zeke's Geiger counter hadn't. Zeke was a mechanic. He dealt with machines. Vance dealt with flesh and blood. This was my body, my blood. It was being turned against me. Is it reversible? I asked. If you stay away from the source, yes, Vance said. We can start chelation therapy. We can give you boosters for your immune system. It will be a slow road, but you are tough. You have the constitution of an ox. But Cedric, we have to report this. This is a public health hazard. No, I said quickly. Not yet. Cedric, this is the law. I leaned forward. Vance, you owe Zeke a favor, and Zeke owes me his life. If you report this now, the people who did this will get away with it. They will destroy the evidence. I need time. Just give me a few days. Vance looked at me for a long time. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw the anger burning behind the sickness. He slowly pulled the file back. I will put you on a vitamin regimen for now, he said quietly. I will document this as a severe anemia investigation. But Cedric, if you feel even a little bit worse, you come straight back here. Do you hear me? I hear you, Doc. I walked out of that office with a bottle of iron supplements and a death sentence that I had narrowly escaped. I sat in my Buick for a long time, just gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't sad anymore. Sadness is a luxury for people who have time. I didn't have time. I had a war to win. Driving home, the streets of my neighborhood looked different. The trees looked sharper. The colors of the houses looked brighter. It was the clarity of a man who had stared into the abyss and stepped back. I turned onto my street and saw my house sitting on the hill. It used to look like a sanctuary. Now, it looked like a fortress that had been breached. I pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. Courtney's SUV was gone. That was good. She was probably out spending money she didn't have yet. But Jamal's car was there. I entered the house quietly, the same way I had done the day before. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. I could hear sounds coming from the ground floor. Scuffling sounds, paper rustling. The sounds were coming from my study. My study was my private space. It was where I kept Bernice's sewing machine. It was where I kept my blueprints from the old days. It was where I kept the family records. No one went in there without asking. It was the one rule I had enforced since Jamal was a boy. I walked down the hall, my footsteps absorbed by the thick carpet. The door to the study was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was a disaster. Drawers were pulled out and dumped onto the floor. Files were scattered everywhere like fallen leaves. Books had been swept off the shelves. And there, in the middle of the chaos, was Jamal, my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had paid tuition for. He was on his hands and knees, frantically digging through a pile of manila envelopes. He was sweating, his shirt clinging to his back. He looked desperate. He looked like a junkie looking for a fix. He was holding a blue folder. I knew that folder. It contained the original deed to the house and the trust documents. He found it. I stood in the doorway, my shadow falling over him. Found what you were looking for, son. Jamal jumped as if he had been shot. He scrambled backward, his elbow hitting the small side table where I kept Bernice's picture. Crash. The silver frame hit the hardwood floor. The glass shattered. Jamal froze. He looked at the broken glass. He looked at the photo of his mother, now smiling up at him from behind a spiderweb of cracks. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with terror. He tried to hide the blue folder behind his back, but it was too late. Dad, he stammered. You are home early. I looked at the mess. I looked at the broken picture. I felt a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with radiation. What are you doing, Jamal? I asked. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Jamal stood up, his legs shaking. He laughed nervously, a high, pitched sound that didn't belong to a grown man. I was looking for your pills, he lied. Courtney said you ran out of your heart medication. We looked everywhere. I thought maybe you left them in here. I panicked. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I looked at the drawers. I looked at the financial records scattered on the rug. You look for aspirin in a file cabinet? I asked. You look for pills inside the property deed folder? Jamal flinched. He looked down at the blue folder in his hand, as if he had forgotten he was holding it. Oh, this? He said, his voice trembling. I saw it and I thought, I wanted to make sure everything was in order. You know, in case I die? I finished the sentence for him. No, Pop, don't say that. He took a step toward me, crunching the glass of his mother's frame under his expensive loafers. He didn't even notice. I noticed. "Courtney sent you, didn't she?" I asked. "She needs the deed number to list the house. She needs to know if the trust is revocable." Jamal's face crumbled. He looked like he was about to cry. He was 40 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a 6-year-old who had broken a vase. "She is just trying to help, Dad. We are in debt, deep debt. If we don't get some liquidity soon—" "Liquidity," I scoffed. "That is a fancy word for selling my blood and sweat." I walked over to him. I didn't yell. I didn't raise a hand. I just held out my hand. "Give it to me." Jamal looked at the folder. He looked at me. For a second, I saw hesitation. I saw him weighing his fear of his wife against his respect for his father. The fear won. He clutched the folder tighter. "Pop, please, just sign it over. We will take care of you. We will get you the best room at Sunny Meadows. We just need to borrow against the equity. I promise I will pay it back." "You promise?" I asked softly. "Like you promised to finish college? Like you promised to stop gambling? Like you promised to protect this family?" Jamal looked down. Shame radiated off him in waves. "I am sorry, Pop," he whispered. "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Jamal. You just never liked the hard ones." I stepped closer and snatched the folder from his hand. He was younger than me. He was stronger than me. But he let me take it, because deep down, he knew he was wrong. "Get out," I said. "Dad, get out of my study, and tell your wife you couldn't find it. Tell her the old man hid it." Jamal looked at me, then at the broken picture on the floor. He wanted to say something. He wanted to apologize, but he didn't have the words. He turned and ran out of the room, leaving me alone in the wreckage of my life. I knelt down slowly. My knees popped. I picked up the photo of Bernice. I carefully brushed the glass shards off her face. "I am sorry, baby," I whispered to the photo. I failed him. I raised him to be kind, but I forgot to teach him how to be a man. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the mess. I felt old, older than I had ever felt. The radiation was killing my body, but this betrayal was killing my soul. Jamal wasn't the mastermind. I knew that. He was weak. He was a follower. But a follower who opens the gate for the enemy is just as dangerous as the enemy themselves. I opened the top drawer of my desk, the only one Jamal hadn't managed to pry open yet. I took out a black notebook. Inside was the phone number for Alicia, my lawyer. I picked up the phone. "Alicia," I said when she answered. "It is Cedric. I need to make a change to my will. Is everything okay, Mr. Robinson?" she asked. "No," I said, looking at the empty doorway where my son had just stood. "Nothing is okay. I need to create a temporary amendment. I want to suspend all beneficiaries." "All of them?" Alicia asked, surprised. "Even Jamal?" "Especially Jamal," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Until further notice, if anything happens to me, the house, the money, the car, it all goes to the church charity fund. Nobody gets a dime." There was a silence on the line. Alicia understood. She didn't ask questions. "I will draft it today," she said. "Thank you." I hung up. I sat back in my chair. I had just disinherited my only child. It felt like cutting off my own arm. But I had to do it. I had to stop the bleeding. If Courtney knew there was no money at the end of the rainbow, maybe she would stop trying to kill me. Or maybe she would get desperate. I looked at the decoy watch on my wrist. Let them get desperate, I thought. Desperate people make mistakes, and I would be waiting. I carefully placed the blue folder in my portable safe and locked it. I put the key in my pocket. From now on, that key would stay next to my skin. I stood up and started to clean the room. I picked up the papers one by one. I swept up the glass. I put Bernice's photo back on the table, minus the glass. I would fix the frame later, just like I would fix this family. But first, I had to survive the night. Because now that Jamal had failed, Courtney would take matters into her own hands. And she wouldn't be looking for pills. She would be looking for a funeral. I always thought evil would look ugly. I thought it would look like a monster from a children's book, or a criminal with a scar on his face. But as I sat in the front seat of my Buick, parked in the far corner of the Home Depot parking lot, looking at the photographs spread out on my dashboard, I realized I was wrong. Evil looked like my daughter-in-law. It looked like Courtney in a designer dress, smiling at a charity gala. It looked like Courtney holding a champagne glass. It looked like Courtney walking into a casino in Atlantic City at 3 in the morning. Ray, the private investigator I had hired 3 days ago, took a long drag from his cigarette. He was a man who blended in. He looked like a plumber or a delivery driver, the kind of guy nobody notices. But Ray noticed everything. "It is worse than we thought, Cedric," Ray said, blowing smoke out the window. "You were right to be suspicious, but you were wrong about her profession. She is not a real estate developer. She is a gambler, and she is a bad one." I picked up a document from the pile. It was a credit report. The numbers were staggering. Lines of credit maxed out. Personal loans defaulted on. "She has been playing a shell game for 5 years," Ray explained, pointing at the papers with a calloused finger. "She moves money from one card to pay another. She took out loans in Jamal's name without him knowing. But 6 months ago, the house of cards collapsed. She got into cryptocurrency. She thought she was the Wolf of Wall Street. She lost $200,000 in a week. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. $200,000. My son worked 60 hours a week as a project manager. He didn't make that kind of money in 2 years. That is not the worst part," Ray continued. "To cover that loss, she went to the sharks, not the bank, the guys who break knees. She borrowed $300,000 from a loan shark syndicate operating out of the back of a strip club in the city. The interest rate is 10% a week. I did the math in my head. 10% a week. She was drowning. She owes them $500,000 right now, Cedric," Ray said softly, "and they are done waiting. I intercepted some texts. They gave her a deadline, end of the month, or else." "Or else what?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Or else they take it out of her skin, or Jamal's skin." I stared at the photo of Courtney laughing at a poker table. This wasn't just greed, this was desperation. She wasn't killing me because she wanted a bigger house. She was killing me because my house was the only thing standing between her and a concrete pair of shoes. I was her piggy bank, and she needed to smash me open to save her own life. I paid Ray in cash, thanked him, and drove home. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I thought about Jamal. Did he know? Did he know his wife had sold their souls to the mob? Probably not. Courtney was a master manipulator. She probably told him the money problems were temporary market fluctuations. She probably told him they just needed a bridge loan. When I got back to the house, the sun was setting. The long shadows of the trees stretched across the lawn like prison bars. I parked the Buick and walked inside, moving slowly, keeping up my act of the frail, dying old man. The house was quiet, too quiet. I went upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door. I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the small monitor I had hidden inside my closet. Years ago, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, I had installed a security system. Cameras at the front door, the back door, and the garage. When Courtney moved in, she demanded I take them down because she valued her privacy. I told her I did, but I lied. I just hid them better. I turned on the monitor. The black and white feed flickered to life. I saw the front porch. A black sedan was parked in the driveway, right behind Courtney's SUV. It wasn't a car I recognized. It was sleek, expensive, and menacing. 2 men were standing at my front door. They didn't look like bankers. They were big men. One wore a leather jacket that was too tight across his shoulders. The other wore a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly. I switched the audio feed on. I had installed a high-gain microphone in the porch light fixture. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a long, insistent press. I watched the screen. The door opened. Courtney stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual mask of arrogance. She looked small. Her shoulders were hunched. She was hugging herself. "Gentlemen," I heard her voice through the speaker, trembling slightly. "You shouldn't be here. My husband is home. My father-in-law is upstairs." The man in the leather jacket stepped forward. He didn't care who was home. He stepped right into her personal space, forcing her to back up against the doorframe. "We don't care about your husband, Mrs. Robinson," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly. "We care about our money. You said Tuesday. It is Thursday." "I am working on it," Courtney pleaded. Her voice was a whisper, but the microphone picked it up clearly. "I just need a little more time. The paperwork is almost done." "We are done with paperwork," the man said. "The boss is unhappy. He thinks you are playing games. He thinks maybe you don't have the asset you promised." "I do. I have it," Courtney hissed. She looked around nervously, checking to see if the neighbors were watching. "It is a $2 million property. No mortgage. It is pure equity. It covers the debt 4 times over." "Then give us the title," the man said. "I can't yet," Courtney's voice cracked. "The owner, he is still occupying the premises." I sat in the dark closet, watching my life being discussed like a business transaction. I was the occupier. I was the obstacle. The man in the suit spoke for the first time. He checked his watch. A nice watch. Probably taken from someone who didn't pay. "Remove the obstacle," he said. "Simple." "I am trying," Courtney cried. "I swear to you. He is sick. He is very sick. It is just taking longer than I thought. He is stubborn." "How sick?" the leather jacket man asked. "Terminal," Courtney lied. The lie came out so easily. "Cancer, stage 4. It is in his bones. The doctors say it is any day now. He is bedridden. He can barely speak." I looked at my own hand in the dim light of the closet. I clenched a fist. I wasn't bedridden. I wasn't silent. The man in the leather jacket leaned in close to her face. I could see Courtney flinch. "Any day now is not a date, Mrs. Robinson. We need a date." "Next week," Courtney gasped. "Give me 1 week, 7 days. By next Friday the house will be mine. I will sign the promissory note against the deed the second he takes his last breath." 1 week, the man repeated. He reached out and touched her cheek. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a threat. "If we don't have the money by next Friday at noon, we aren't coming for the house. We are coming for you. And we are coming for that pretty husband of yours. We will break him first, so you can watch. Do you understand?" "Yes," Courtney sobbed. "Yes, I understand. Next Friday, I promise." "Good," the man said. "Give our regards to the dying man. Hope he goes peacefully." The 2 men turned and walked back to their black car. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew the prey had nowhere to run. Courtney stood on the porch for a long time after they drove away. I saw her wipe her eyes. Then, I saw her face change. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She smoothed her hair. She straightened her back. She wasn't crying for me. She wasn't crying for the crime she was committing. She was resetting her mask. She turned and went back inside the house. I switched off the monitor. The silence in the closet was deafening. 1 week. That was my deadline. If I didn't die from the radiation in 7 days, Courtney would have to accelerate the process. She was desperate now. A desperate woman with a $500,000 debt and a death threat hanging over her head wouldn't wait for a slow poison to work. She would switch tactics. She might try to overdose me on painkillers. She might try to push me down the stairs. She might just smother me with a pillow while I slept and claim I stopped breathing. The radiation was the silent killer, the clean killer. But now, she needed a fast killer. I unlocked the closet door and stepped back into my bedroom. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. I walked over to the calendar on the wall. I took a red pen and circled next Friday. The end. That is what she thought that day was. I looked at the decoy watch on my wrist. It ticked steadily. She thought she had 7 days to kill me, but she was wrong. I had 7 days to destroy her. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the sound of her footsteps on the stairs. I knew she would come up to check on me. She would come to make sure her golden goose was still dying on schedule. The door handle turned. "Dad?" her voice called out. It was sweet again. The fear was gone from her tone, replaced by that sickening fake concern. "David, are you awake?" I lay back on the pillows and let my mouth hang open. I made my breathing sound ragged and wet. "I am here, Courtney," I rasped. She walked in. She didn't turn on the light. She stood by the bed, looking down at me in the shadows. I could smell the faint scent of fear sweat underneath her expensive perfume. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired," I whispered. "So tired." "Good," she said softly. "That is good. You should rest. You need to sleep deeply." She reached out and patted my hand. Her hand was shaking. "Just let go, Dad," she whispered. "It is okay to let go. We will be fine." She wasn't comforting me. She was pleading with me to die so she could save her own skin. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. "I will, Courtney," I mumbled. "Soon." She stood there for another minute, watching me, waiting, hoping I would stop breathing right then and there. When she finally left the room, I opened my eyes in the dark. 1 week. I reached under my mattress and pulled out the old voice recorder I used to use for site inspections. I clicked it on. Day 1 of 7, I whispered into the microphone. Subject, Courtney Robinson. Motive, gambling debt to organized crime. Intent, murder. I clicked it off. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner, and the trial was about to begin. I had to make sure Jamal saw who she really was before the clock ran out. I had to make sure that when the sharks came back, they didn't find a dying old man. They would find an empty house and a woman with nothing left to sell. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling. I wouldn't sleep tonight. I had plans to make. And for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of what I was capable of doing to survive. The mixture in the plastic cup looked exactly like bright red arterial blood, but it tasted like strawberries. I stood in my bathroom at 2 in the morning, mixing corn syrup, red food coloring, and a little bit of chocolate sauce to darken it. I had used this same recipe 40 years ago to scare my friends on Halloween, but tonight I was using it to trap a monster. I swished the liquid around in my mouth, letting it coat my teeth and gums. I spilled some on my white pajama shirt, staining the cotton a violent crimson. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a man in the final stages of a fatal hemorrhage. I looked like death walking. I took a deep breath. This was it. The performance that would save my life, or end it. I turned off the bathroom light and stumbled out into the hallway. I didn't just walk. I threw my weight against the wall, making the pictures rattle. I knocked over a vase on the console table. The crash echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. Then I let myself fall. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, right outside Jamal and Courtney's bedroom door. I groaned loud and guttural, a sound that came from deep in my chest. Then I let the fake blood spill from my lips, pooling on the floorboards next to my cheek. I lay there, eyes half open, waiting. It took 10 seconds. The door swung open. The light from their bedroom spilled out. Courtney was the first one out. She was wearing a silk eye mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked down at me. She saw the blood. She saw my body twitching. For a split second, I saw her real face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't concern. It was triumph. A flash of pure, unadulterated joy crossed her features. She looked like a gambler who had just seen the final card hit the table. "Oh my God," she screamed. But the scream was delayed. It was rehearsed. "Jamal, come quick. It is your father." Jamal stumbled out behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw me lying in the puddle of red syrup, his knees gave out. He dropped to the floor beside me, his hands hovering over my chest, terrified to touch me. "David," he cried, his voice cracking. "Dad, what happened? Pop, can you hear me?" I let out a wheezing breath and coughed, sending a spray of red droplets onto Jamal's hands. "Help," I whispered. "Pain. Call 911. Jamal yelled at Courtney. "Call them now. He is bleeding out." Courtney stood over us. She didn't move toward the phone immediately. She stood there for 5 agonizing seconds, just watching. She was calculating. She was wondering if she should wait a few more minutes to make sure I was really gone. "Courtney, call them!" Jamal screamed again, looking up at her with tears streaming down his face. She snapped out of her trance. "I am calling," she said, her voice suddenly shifting into panic mode. She grabbed her phone and dialed. I listened to her speak to the operator. "Please hurry. My father-in-law collapsed. There is so much blood. I think he is dying. Please." She was a good actress. If I didn't know she owed $500,000 to the mob, I might have believed her. I closed my eyes and let my body go limp. Jamal was holding my hand, squeezing it so hard it hurt. His hands were shaking violently. I felt a pang of pity for him. He was weak and foolish, but he loved me. He was crying real tears. His wife was crying crocodile tears. The wait for the ambulance was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Courtney knelt on the other side of me. She stroked my hair. "It is okay, Dad," she whispered close to my ear. Her voice was soft, but her words were poison. "You can let go now. You don't have to fight anymore. Just close your eyes and sleep. It will all be over soon." She was trying to talk me into death. She was giving me permission to die so she could cash out. When the paramedics arrived, it was a whirlwind of lights and noise. They lifted me onto the stretcher. I kept my act up, moaning softly, letting my head loll to the side. As they wheeled me out the front door into the cool night air, I saw Courtney grab her purse. She didn't grab my medical records. She didn't grab a change of clothes for me. She grabbed her heavy leather satchel, the one where she kept her legal documents. She was bringing the paperwork to my deathbed. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens. Jamal sat in the back with me, holding my hand the entire way. He prayed aloud, asking God to spare me. I wanted to squeeze his hand back to tell him I was okay, but I couldn't. I had to stay in character. We arrived at St. Jude's Hospital. This was part 2 of my plan. Dr. Vance had arranged for me to be brought to his shift. He was the head of emergency medicine tonight. The doors burst open, and the paramedics wheeled me into the trauma bay. Dr. Vance was there waiting. He looked serious, professional. He didn't acknowledge our secret plan. He just went to work. "BP is dropping," he shouted to the nurses. "We have massive internal bleeding. Get a line in. Type and cross-match 4 units. He leaned over me, shining a light in my eyes. He whispered so only I could hear. "Good show, Cedric. Now leave the rest to me." He stepped back and turned to Courtney and Jamal, who were standing in the doorway of the trauma room. "You need to wait outside," Vance ordered. "We need to stabilize him." "No," Courtney said, pushing past a nurse. "I am his medical proxy. I have the right to be here. I need to know what is happening." Vance looked at her. He looked at the fake blood on my shirt. He looked at the charts he had already falsified. "It is bad, Mrs. Robinson," Vance said gravely. "His organs are shutting down. The radiation levels we detected earlier, it seems to have triggered a cascade failure. His liver is hemorrhaging. His kidneys are gone." "Is he going to make it?" Jamal asked, his voice small and terrified. Vance shook his head slowly. "I am sorry. It is unlikely he will survive the night. We are doing everything we can, but his body is exhausted. He has maybe a few hours." A silence fell over the room. I watched Courtney through my half-closed eyelids. Her posture straightened. She took a deep breath. She wasn't grieving. She was preparing for business. "I see," she said. Her voice was steady. "If he is suffering, doctor, we don't want to prolong it." "Courtney, what are you saying?" Jamal gasped. "We have to try everything. Put him on a ventilator. Do surgery." "No, Jamal," Courtney said, turning to him and putting her hands on his shoulders. "Look at him. He is in pain. He is 75 years old. Do you want to cut him open just to give him a few more hours of agony? That is selfish. We have to let him go with dignity." She turned back to Dr. Vance. "We have a do not resuscitate order," she lied. "We discussed this as a family. No machines, no CPR. If his heart stops, let him go." "I don't remember signing that," Jamal said, confused. "He signed it weeks ago," Courtney said quickly, when his mind was still clear. "I have the power of attorney, Jamal. Trust me, this is what he wanted." She looked at Vance. "Do you have the paperwork here, doctor?" "The DNR form. I will sign it now to confirm his wishes." Vance looked at me. I gave the tiniest nod. This was part of the trap. We needed her signature on a document refusing to save my life while I was technically still savable. It was proof of her intent. Vance pulled a clipboard from the wall. "If you are the legal guardian, you can sign this," he said. "It means we will provide pain management only, no life-saving measures." Courtney snatched the clipboard. She didn't read it. She didn't hesitate. She uncapped her pen and signed her name with a flourish. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the quiet room. "There," she said, handing it back. No heroics. She had just signed my death warrant. In her mind, she had just killed me. "Can we have a moment with him?" she asked. "To say goodbye?" "Of course," Vance said. He stepped back, signaling the nurses to leave the room. Courtney pulled a chair up to my bedside. Jamal stood at the foot of the bed, weeping silently. Courtney didn't hold my hand. She reached into her bag, that leather satchel. She pulled out a thick stack of documents. "Jamal," she said sharply, "stop crying. We have to do this while he is still conscious enough to hold a pen." "Do what?" Jamal asked, wiping his eyes. "The transfer," Courtney hissed. "The house, the accounts. If he dies before he signs these, the state will freeze everything for months. Probate will take a year. The creditors won't wait a year, Jamal. We will lose everything. We will be homeless by next week." She put the papers on the bed, right on top of my legs. "Dad," she said, leaning close to my face. "Can you hear me?" I groaned, opening my eyes a crack. Who is there?" I whispered. "It is Courtney, Dad, and Jamal. We love you. Listen to me. We need you to do one last thing for us, to protect Jamal." "Protect Jamal," I mumbled. "Yes, you need to sign these papers. It just says you are leaving the house to us, so nobody can take it away. It is for Jamal. Do it for your son." She put a pen in my hand. My hand was covered in sticky corn syrup. She didn't care. She wrapped her fingers around mine, forcing the pen toward the paper. "Sign here," she ordered. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was hard, urgent. I let my hand tremble. I made the pen scratch a jagged line across the paper. "Good," she breathed. "One more, right here." She flipped the page. I looked at the document through my lashes. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of my house to Courtney Robinson solely. Not Jamal and Courtney. Just Courtney. She was cutting him out, too. I dropped the pen. I can't," I whispered, too tired. Courtney grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. Her fingernails dug into my skin. "Pick it up," she hissed. "Pick up the pen, old man. Don't you dare die on me yet. Sign the damn paper." "Courtney, stop," Jamal said, stepping forward. "You are hurting him." "Shut up, Jamal," she snapped, not looking at him. "If he doesn't sign this, we are dead. Do you understand? We are dead." She forced the pen back into my hand. She was practically moving my arm for me. She was forging my signature using my own limp hand as a tool. "There," she said triumphantly, as the ink marked the final page. "Done." She snatched the papers away and shoved them into her bag. She checked the signatures, ensuring they were legible enough to pass. She let out a long breath. She looked at me. "You can go now, Cedric," she whispered. "You served your purpose." She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "I am going to call my lawyer," she told Jamal. "I need to get these filed first thing in the morning. You stay here and watch him die. Call me when he flatlines." "You are leaving?" Jamal asked, incredulous. "I have business to handle," Courtney said coldly. She didn't look back. She walked out of the hospital room, leaving her husband and her dying father-in-law alone. I waited until the click of her heels faded down the corridor. I opened my eyes fully. I turned my head and looked at my son. He was staring at the door, his mouth open in shock. He had finally seen it. He had seen the monster without her mask. He looked at me. "Dad," he whispered, "you are awake." I sat up. I wiped the sticky red syrup from my mouth. "I am awake, son," I said, my voice strong and clear. "And it is time for you to wake up too." I lay in the darkness of the VIP hospital suite, listening to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was a fake rhythm, generated by a machine that Dr. Vance had tweaked, but to the people standing at the foot of my bed, it was the soundtrack of a dying man. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing shallow and ragged. I was exhausted, not from the radiation, which was still pulsing in my veins, but from the sheer effort of playing this role. I was a man suspended between life and death, waiting for the vultures to land. And they didn't keep me waiting long. The door whooshed open. I heard the sharp click of high heels on the linoleum floor, followed by the heavy thud of men's dress shoes. There were 3 of them. I could smell Courtney's perfume overpowering and sweet like rotting flowers. I could smell the stale scent of fear on my son Jamal, and I could smell something else. Expensive cologne and cigar smoke, the lawyer. "This is highly irregular, Mrs. Robinson," a man's voice said. It was smooth, oily, and lacked any trace of empathy. "Usually we handle these transfers in my office, not over the body of a comatose patient." "We don't have time for your office," Courtney snapped. Her voice was tight, vibrating with a panic she was barely suppressing. "The doctor said he won't make it through the night. If we don't transfer the digital assets now, the accounts will be frozen the second his heart stops. Do you want to explain to the creditors why their money is stuck in probate court for 6 months?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "I understand the urgency, but I need to verify that the donor is, well, consenting." "He consented this morning." Courtney lied effortlessly. "He signed the paper will. This is just the digital verification. The bank requires a biometric login to release the funds from the trust. Look at him. He is gone. He is just a shell waiting to expire. We are doing what he wanted." I felt a hand on my arm. It was Jamal. His touch was tentative, shaking. Courtney, he whispered. Maybe we should stop. Look at him. He looks peaceful. Let's just let him rest. We have the paper will. Isn't that enough? It is not enough, Jamal, Courtney hissed. The paper will covers the house. The biometric login covers the cash, the liquid assets. We need the cash to pay off the loan. Tonight. She lowered her voice, but I heard every word. Do you want to be homeless, Jamal? Do you want those men in the leather jackets to come back and break your legs? Because that is what happens if we walk out of this room without that money. So shut up and hold the iPad. There was a silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then I heard Jamal sniffle. I felt the bed shift as he moved closer. He was complying. He was always complying. I felt the cold glass screen of a tablet being placed on the mattress next to my hand. Okay, the lawyer said, sounding bored. I have the transfer protocol ready. All we need is a thumbprint authorization. Once the system recognizes his print, the funds will be wired to your joint account immediately. Do it, Courtney ordered. She grabbed my left hand. Her grip was cold and clammy. She didn't treat my hand like flesh and blood. She treated it like a tool, a key she needed to turn in a lock. I went limp. I let my arm be dead weight. She maneuvered my thumb over the sensor on the screen. Press hard, she muttered. She pushed my thumb down onto the glass. I felt the pressure. I waited. Beep. A harsh error sound echoed from the tablet. Try again, the lawyer sighed. It didn't read. She shifted her grip, digging her nails into my palm. She pressed my thumb down again, rolling it slightly from side to side, just like they do at the police station. Beep. Error. Biometric not recognized. What is wrong with this thing? Courtney snapped, slamming the iPad against the mattress. It is a brand new Pro model. It should work. Maybe his circulation is too poor, the lawyer suggested. If the blood flow to the extremities is compromised, the ridges of the fingerprint might not register. He is dying, Mrs. Robinson. His body is shutting down. No, Courtney growled. It is not his blood. It is something on his hand. She lifted my hand up to her face. I could feel her hot breath on my skin. She was inspecting my thumb. I held my breath. I prayed she wouldn't look too closely. Hours ago, before I staged my collapse in the hallway, I had gone into my workshop. I took a bottle of industrial cyanoacrylate superglue, the kind I use to fix porcelain insulators. I had carefully painted a thin, clear layer over the pads of my thumbs and index fingers. It was an old trick I used in the winter to keep my calluses from cracking in the cold air. But tonight, it was a shield. The glue filled in the ridges of my fingerprints, creating a smooth, unrecognizable surface. To the naked eye, it looked like skin. To a biometric scanner, it looked like nothing. There is something on his skin, Courtney said, her voice rising in hysteria. It is smooth. It feels like plastic. She scratched at my thumb with her fingernail. It is glue, she realized. The old fool has glue on his hands. Why does he have glue on his hands? Maybe from his hobbies, Jamal offered weakly. He was fixing a vase earlier. Courtney didn't care about the why. She only cared about the obstacle. Give me a wipe, she ordered. There are no wipes, Jamal said. Then use water. Use anything. Get it off him. She grabbed a pitcher of water from the bedside table and splashed it onto my hands, soaking the sheets. The water was ice cold. I didn't flinch. She began to scrub. She used the rough edge of the hospital blanket. She rubbed my thumb violently back and forth. It hurt. The friction burned my skin. She wasn't cleaning me. She was sanding me down. Come on, she grunted, scrubbing harder. I lay there, listening to the sound of the fabric rasping against my skin. I imagined I was a piece of wood she was trying to polish. I detached myself from the pain. I floated above the room, watching this woman destroy her dignity for a few $1,000,000. She stopped and checked the thumb. Still there, she screamed. It is industrial stuff. It is not coming off. She looked around the room wildly. Her eyes landed on a metal instrument tray on the counter. There was a nail file there, left by a careless nurse. Or maybe it was hers, I didn't know. She grabbed it. Courtney, no, Jamal cried out. You can't do that. You are going to cut him. I don't care, she yelled, spinning on him. He is dying, Jamal. He doesn't feel it. He is a vegetable. But we are alive, and I intend to stay that way. She grabbed my hand again. I braced myself. This was the test. If I pulled back, if I gasped, I was dead. The game would be over. She took the metal file and scraped it against the pad of my thumb. Pain shot up my arm like a lightning bolt. It was sharp and hot. She was scraping away the glue, but she was also taking layers of skin with it. She was practically flaying my fingerprint off. My body wanted to recoil. My brain screamed at me to punch her in the throat, but I forced my muscles to remain flaccid. I focused on the beep of the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Courtney, please stop. Jamal was sobbing now. This is insane. This is torture. It is necessary, Courtney panted, scraping harder. Almost. Got it. Blood began to mix with the water on my hand. Real blood this time, not corn syrup. She dropped the file. There, she said, breathless. That should do it. She wiped the blood onto the sheet. She grabbed the iPad again. She pressed my raw, bleeding thumb onto the glass sensor. I waited. The pain was throbbing, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The tablet processed. The little circle on the screen spun. Beep. Authorized. Transfer complete. Courtney let out a scream of relief. She dropped my hand as if it were a dead rat. It fell onto the mattress with a dull thud. Yes, she cried. Yes, we are safe. It went through. The lawyer checked his own phone. Confirming. The funds have been moved to the offshore holding account as requested. You have full access, Mrs. Robinson. Excellent, Courtney said, straightening her dress. She looked at me one last time. She didn't see a father. She didn't see a human being. She saw an ATM that she had finally emptied. She looked at the blood on my thumb. Clean that up, she told Jamal. It looks disgusting. And when he dies, call the cremation service immediately. I don't want an autopsy. It costs too much, and we don't need anyone asking questions about his skin condition. She turned to the lawyer. Let's go. We have a wire transfer to send to our associates. She walked out of the room. The lawyer followed her, tucking his tablet into his briefcase. Jamal was left alone with me. He stood there for a long time. He looked at the door where his wife had exited. Then he looked at my bleeding thumb. He reached out and gently took my hand. He used the corner of the sheet to dab away the blood. His touch was soft. I am sorry, Pop, he whispered. His tears fell onto my wrist, mixing with the blood. I am so sorry. I am a coward. I know I am. He kissed my forehead. It was the kiss of Judas, but it was also the kiss of a son who was broken. Goodbye, Dad, he said. He turned off the main light, leaving me in the dim glow of the monitors. He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. I opened my eyes. I sat up in the bed. I looked at my thumb. It was raw and stinging, but the cut wasn't deep. The glue had protected most of the skin. I looked at the door. Authorized. That is what the machine said. Courtney thought she had just transferred $2 million into her account. She didn't know that 3 hours ago, Alicia, my lawyer, had implemented the emergency amendment. The account connected to that biometric login was no longer my main trust. It was a decoy account I kept for online purchases. It had exactly $400.50 in it. Courtney was going to walk into that meeting with the loan sharks, thinking she was a millionaire. She was going to try to wire them $500,000, and the transaction was going to bounce. Hard. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I walked over to the sink and washed the blood off my hand. The trap wasn't just set, it had just been sprung. I grabbed the phone on the wall and dialed a number. Dr. Vance answered on the first ring. It is done, I said. Did they sign the DNR? Vance asked. Yes, and they tried to access the funds. Good, Vance said. You are officially dead to the world, Cedric. You have 24 hours before they come back for the body. I won't be here, I said. I have one more stop to make. Where are you going? I am going to the bank, I said. I need to make sure the foreclosure notice on my own house is delivered on time. I hung up. I looked at the empty room. I stripped off the hospital gown and put on the clothes I had stashed in the bottom drawer of the bedside table. I walked out of the VIP suite, not as a dying man, but as a ghost with a vengeance. And tomorrow, I was going to haunt them in broad daylight. The smell of frying bacon is the smell of life. It is salt and fat and smoke, and it wakes up parts of the brain that have given up on the future. For the last month, the smell of food made me gag. The radiation sickness had turned my stomach into a knot of nausea. But this morning, when I opened my eyes, the nausea was gone. The fog in my head had lifted. The bone-deep ache that had made every movement agony was just a dull throb now. My body was healing. The week without the radioactive watch had given my bone marrow a fighting chance. I sat up in bed. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs without coughing. I was alive, and I was hungry. I went downstairs at 6 in the morning. The house was silent as a tomb. They were all asleep, probably dreaming of the inheritance they thought they had secured last night. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. I took out a package of thick-cut bacon eggs and a carton of orange juice. I turned on the stove. The hiss of the gas burner sounded like music. 30 minutes later, the kitchen was filled with blue smoke and the sound of sizzling grease. I sat at the island, eating with the appetite of a man who had been starving for 40 days. I heard the footsteps upstairs. Rapid, panicked footsteps. Then Courtney appeared in the doorway. She was wearing the same dress she had worn to the hospital. She hadn't slept. Her makeup was smeared under her eyes, and her hair was a mess. She looked like a woman who was waiting for a phone call from the morgue. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She gripped the door frame so hard her knuckles turned white. She blinked once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. "Cedric," she whispered. Her voice was a dry croak. "Good morning, Courtney," I said. I didn't look up from my plate. I dipped a piece of toast into the yolk of my egg and took a bite. "The coffee is fresh. Do you want a cup?" She stumbled into the room. She walked around the island, keeping her distance, as if I were a zombie that might bite her. She stared at the plate of food. She stared at my face, which had some color back in it. She stared at my hands, which were holding the fork with a steady grip. "But," she stammered, "the doctor, last night, he said..." "Doctors don't know everything," I said, chewing slowly. I woke up feeling renewed. Maybe it was just a virus after all. Or maybe it was the prayer. Jamal prayed for me, right? God listens to the prayers of a son. I looked at her then. I locked eyes with her. I saw the gears turning in her head. She was trying to reconcile the image of the dying man in the hospital bed with the man eating breakfast in her kitchen. It didn't make sense. The radiation poisoning should have been terminal. Once the organ failure started, it wasn't supposed to stop. Unless the dose wasn't high enough. Or unless the exposure had stopped. Her eyes darted to my wrist. I was wearing the watch. The decoy. I had put it on the moment I woke up. She stared at it. I saw the confusion morph into suspicion. "You are wearing the watch," she said. "You told me to," I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "You said it was therapeutic. You said it helps my heart. I think you were right, Courtney. I feel the energy. It is like a recharge." I tapped the glass face of the watch. Tick, tick, tick. Courtney looked sick. She looked like she was about to vomit on my clean floor. I have to make a call," she muttered. She turned and ran back upstairs. She didn't go to her bedroom. She went to the guest room down the hall, the one she used as her office. I finished my coffee. The game was entering the final round. She was panicked, and panic makes people sloppy. I stood up and put my dishes in the sink. I needed to give her a chance to inspect the weapon. I needed her to believe that she had been ripped off. I walked to the foot of the stairs and yelled up, "Courtney, I am going to take a shower. All this hospital smell. I need to wash it off." I heard a door close upstairs. She was listening. I went into my bathroom. I turned on the shower, making it hot enough to steam up the mirror. Then I did something I knew she would be watching for. I took off the watch. I placed it carefully on the marble vanity right next to the sink. Then I stepped into the shower stall, but I didn't close the glass door all the way. I left a crack. I turned the water on full blast, creating a curtain of noise. I stood in the corner of the shower, out of the spray, fully clothed, waiting. It didn't take long, 2 minutes maybe. The bathroom door opened softly. Through the steam and the crack in the shower door, I saw her. Courtney crept into the room. She was looking at the shower, checking to make sure I was inside. She saw the silhouette of a body. She heard the water. She moved quickly to the vanity. She grabbed the watch. She held it up to the light. She turned it over. She shook it. She pressed it against her ear. She was looking for the hum. She was looking for the heat. She was looking for the death she had paid for. But it was just a watch, a cold steel mechanical watch. "Damn it," she whispered. Her face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "It is a dud. It is a piece of junk." She put the watch back exactly where I had left it. She smoothed the towel underneath it. She slipped out of the bathroom, closing the door silently behind her. I waited 10 seconds, then I turned off the shower. I didn't get wet. I wrapped a towel around my waist to look like I had just finished. I grabbed my voice recorder from the pocket of my robe hanging on the door. I crept out into the hallway. I could hear her voice coming from the guest room. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was yelling. I moved closer, pressing myself against the wall next to her open door. I hit the record button. "You listen to me, you son of a bitch," she was screaming into her phone. "I paid you $10,000 for a guaranteed result. Guaranteed." There was a pause while the person on the other end spoke. "I don't care about the half-life," she shouted. "I care about the fact that he is downstairs eating bacon and eggs. He looks healthier than he did a month ago. The thing isn't working. It is a paperweight." I held the recorder steady. My heart was hammering, but my hand was rock solid. This was it. This was the confession. "No, I checked it," she hissed. "I held it in my hand just now. It is cold. It isn't emitting anything. You sold me a fake. You swapped out the core for a piece of lead, didn't you? You thought I was just a stupid housewife who wouldn't know the difference." She paced around the room. I could hear her heels digging into the floor. "I don't have time for a replacement," she shrieked. "My deadline is tomorrow at noon. If I don't have the house by then, I am dead. Do you understand? You need to fix this. You need to send someone over here to finish the job." I stopped breathing. She was soliciting a hitman. She was moving from passive murder to active murder. "No, I can't do it," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't use a pillow. He is too strong. He fought off the doctors last night. He is like a cockroach. You need to send a professional. Make it look like a robbery. Make it look like an accident. I don't care. Just get it done tonight." She listened for a moment longer. "Fine. Double the price. Just do it." She hung up. I heard her throw the phone onto the desk. I heard her sobbing. Not tears of remorse, tears of frustration, tears of a spoiled child who broke her favorite toy. I clicked the stop button on the recorder. I had it. I had the solicitation of murder. I had the admission of the radioactive purchase. I had the motive. I slipped back into my bedroom and locked the door. I got dressed quickly. I put the recorder in my pocket next to the safe key. I went back into the bathroom and put the watch back on my wrist. The decoy watch. The watch that had saved my life by doing absolutely nothing. I looked at myself in the mirror. Tonight she was sending killers to my house. Real killers. Not silent radiation, but men with guns or knives. I wasn't afraid. I was a soldier. I had defended perimeters in the jungle against enemies I couldn't see. I could defend my own home against hired thugs. But I wouldn't be doing it alone. I picked up my cell phone. I dialed Zeke. "Zeke," I said when he answered. "Bring the boys." "What boys?" Zeke asked. "The VFW boys," I said. "And bring your hunting gear. We are having a party tonight." "A party?" Zeke asked, his voice perking up. "Yeah," I said, looking at the door where Courtney was hiding. "A surprise party. Someone is coming to rob the house tonight. I think we should welcome them." I hung up. I walked downstairs. Courtney was in the living room pacing. She jumped when she saw me. "David," she said, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of terror. "You look fresh." "I feel fresh, Courtney," I said. "I feel like I could take on the whole world." I walked past her and opened the front door. The morning sun hit my face. "Where are you going?" she asked, suspicious. "Just to the porch," I said. "To watch the neighborhood. You never know who might be coming around these days." I sat on the porch swing. I rocked back and forth. Tick, tick, tick. The watch counted down the seconds. Not my seconds, hers. She thought she had hired a hit squad. She didn't know she had just invited a platoon of angry veterans into a fortified position. Let them come. I was ready. The house was buzzing like a hive of angry bees. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but the caterers were already here, moving furniture and setting up high tables in my living room. They were covering my old, comfortable armchairs with white silk sheets. They were replacing Bernice's hand-crocheted coasters with silver trays. It felt less like a party and more like an invasion. I stood at the top of the stairs watching the chaos below. Courtney was in the center of it all, directing traffic like a general who knew she was losing the war but refused to surrender. She was wearing a red dress, bright blood red. It was a statement piece, a dress that said, "Look at me, I am in charge." But from where I stood, I could see the tremors in her hands as she pointed at the florists. I could see the way she kept checking her phone every 30 seconds. She was terrified. The hitmen she had tried to hire must have backed out, or maybe she realized she couldn't afford their double fee after her transfer bounced last night. So she had pivoted. If she couldn't kill me physically, she would kill me legally. She would bury me under a mountain of witnesses and peer pressure. I walked back into my bedroom and closed the door. My suit was laid out on the bed. It was a navy blue three-piece suit I hadn't worn since Bernice's funeral. It smelled slightly of cedar and memories. I ran my hand over the fabric. Tonight I wouldn't be wearing it for mourning. I would be wearing it for justice. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was Zeke. "We are ready," Biggs said. Zeke's voice was rough and steady. "I have the package. The lead box is secured in the truck, and Alicia is with me. She has the paperwork from the courthouse." "Good," I said quietly. "Don't come to the front door yet. Park down the street. Wait for my signal." "What is the signal?" Zeke asked. "When she asks me to make a speech," I said. "When she thinks she has me cornered, that is when we strike." I hung up. I looked at the decoy watch on my wrist. It was ticking away calmly. It was ironic. Courtney had bought a watch to stop my heart, but this cheap replica was counting down the minutes until her heart stopped beating from shock. I started to get dressed. I took my time. I buttoned my shirt slowly, focusing on my breathing. I tied my tie with precision. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was a man who had built this life with his bare hands, and I was preparing to defend it one last time. Downstairs, the doorbell began to ring. The guests were arriving. I knew who they would be. They wouldn't be my friends. My friends were guys who drank cheap beer on porches and talked about carburetors. These would be Courtney's people, real estate sharks, investment bankers who lost other people's money for a living, the notary she had bribed. They were coming to witness the passing of the torch. They were coming to watch the old lion get skinned. I opened my bedroom door and walked to the landing. The noise level had risen, the clinking of crystal glasses, the murmur of polite, meaningless conversation. Courtney spotted me immediately. She looked up, and for a second her mask slipped. She looked at me with pure hatred, but then the smile snapped back into place. A wide, terrifying smile. "There he is," she announced, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "The man of the hour. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to my father-in-law, Cedric Robinson." Applause broke out. Polite, rippling applause. Faces turned up to look at me. I saw pity in their eyes. They saw a frail old man making his way down the stairs. They didn't know I was descending into the arena. I gripped the banister and made my legs shake just a little. I kept my posture slightly stooped. I had to maintain the illusion for just one more hour. Jamal was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was wearing a tuxedo that looked too tight. He held a glass of whiskey, and his knuckles were white around the tumbler. "You look nice, Pop," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "You look tired, son," I said softly. He flinched. He looked at Courtney, who was making her way toward us through the crowd. "Just do what she says, Pop," Jamal whispered urgently. "Please, just sign the papers tonight. If you don't, I don't know what she will do. She is desperate." I looked at my son. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him that the monster wasn't under the bed. She was wearing a red dress and sleeping next to him. But he wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. He needed to see it. Courtney arrived at my side, wrapping her arm around my waist. Her grip was like a vice. "Dad, you look handsome," she cooed, loud enough for the notary standing nearby to hear. "Doesn't he look great, everyone? We are so blessed to have him with us today." She steered me toward the center of the room. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. Courtney grabbed a glass and shoved it into my hand. "Drink up," she hissed in my ear. "It will make the ink flow smoother." She pulled me toward a large table set up near the fireplace. On the table sat a beautiful floral arrangement, and right in the middle, a stack of documents bound in blue leather covers. The trap. She wasn't hiding it. She was making it the centerpiece of the party. I looked around the room. I estimated there were about 50 people. I recognized the notary, a sweating man named Mr. Henderson, who was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. I recognized a few of Courtney's creditor friends, men who wore suits that cost more than my car, but had eyes that looked like dead fish. Courtney tapped a spoon against her glass. Ting, ting, ting. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "Today is a bittersweet day. As many of you know, Cedric has been struggling with his health." She paused to wipe a fake tear from her eye. A murmur of sympathy went through the crowd. "He has been a pillar of this community," she continued. "A strong man, a provider. But he realizes that it is time to rest. It is time to let the next generation carry the burden." She turned to me. Her eyes were hard as flint. "David has decided to formally transfer the stewardship of this estate and his remaining assets to Jamal and myself. He wants to ensure that his legacy is protected before his illness progresses any further." She gestured to the table, to the documents. "Mr. Henderson, if you would please bring the seal." The sweating notary stepped forward, fumbling with his stamp. Courtney looked at me. "The floor is yours, Dad," she said, sweetness dripping from her voice. "Tell everyone how happy you are to do this." I looked at the documents. I knew what they were. Durable power of attorney, quitclaim deed, irrevocable trust transfer. It was a complete liquidation of my existence. I looked at the crowd. They were waiting. They expected a senile old man to mumble a few words of gratitude and sign his life away. I looked at Courtney. She gave me a tiny nod, a nod that said, "Do it or die." I took a step forward. I set my champagne glass down on the table. I cleared my throat. "Thank you, Courtney," I said. My voice was raspy, but it carried. "Thank you for organizing this gathering. It is truly eye-opening to see how many people are interested in my future." I reached out and touched the blue leather folder. Courtney smiled. She thought she had won. She thought the pressure was working. "You are right," I continued. "I am old. I have worked hard for 40 years. I climbed poles in ice storms. I wired hospitals. I built this house brick by brick. And now, as I look at the end of my life, I have to ask myself, what is it all worth?" I paused. I looked at Jamal. He was staring at me, tears welling in his eyes. "It is worth nothing if it is built on lies," I said, my voice growing stronger. Courtney's smile faltered. She took a half step toward me. "Dad," she warned through gritted teeth, "keep it short." I ignored her. "My daughter-in-law says I am sick," I said, addressing the room. "She says I am failing, and she is right. I have been very sick lately. I have been losing my hair. I have been vomiting blood. I have been weak." A gasp went through the room. Courtney froze. "But the doctors couldn't find a virus," I said. "They couldn't find a bacteria, because the sickness wasn't natural. It was a gift." I raised my left hand. I pulled back my sleeve, revealing the watch. Courtney's eyes widened. She stared at the decoy watch. "This watch," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. "A beautiful gift from my son and his wife. They told me to wear it every day. They told me never to take it off. They said it was good for my heart." "What is he doing?" Courtney whispered to Jamal. "Stop him." But I didn't stop. "I thought it was love," I said. "But love doesn't burn your skin. Love doesn't make your bones decay. Love doesn't come with a half-life of 1,600 years." I looked at the front door. "Now, Zeke!" I yelled. The front door burst open. The room erupted in gasps and screams. Zeke marched in. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a yellow hazmat suit. He looked like an astronaut from a nightmare. He was carrying a heavy gray lead box in one hand and a Geiger counter in the other. Behind him walked Alicia, my lawyer, flanked by two large men who looked like they ate iron bars for breakfast. Courtney screamed, "What is this? Get out of my house!" Zeke didn't stop. He marched right through the crowd, parting the sea of expensive suits like Moses. He walked straight up to the table with the documents and slammed the lead box down right on top of the deed. Thud. The sound echoed in the silence. Zeke flipped the switch on the Geiger counter. The static hiss filled the room. "Everyone step back," Zeke commanded, his voice muffled by the respirator mask. "Unless you want your children to be born with 3 eyes, step back." The crowd scrambled backward. knocking over chairs and spilling drinks. Courtney stood her ground. She was shaking violently. "This is a stunt," she shrieked. "He is crazy. He is senile. Get them out of here." I looked at her. I stopped stooping. I straightened my back to my full height of 6'2". I looked at the woman who had tried to erase me. "Open the box, Zeke," I said. Zeke unlatched the heavy lid. Inside, nestled in foam, was the real watch, the one she had bought, the one she had tested, the one she thought was a dud because she didn't know I had switched it. Courtney stared into the box. Her face went pale as a sheet. The Geiger counter wand moved toward the box. "Screech!" The machine wailed. The needle slammed against the red peg. The sound was terrifying, primal. It was the sound of invisible death. I looked at the crowd. "That is not a watch," I said, my voice cold as steel. "That is a piece of radium-226, industrial grade, lethal, and it was strapped to my arm for 3 months. I turned to Courtney. "You asked for a signature, Courtney. You wanted me to sign over my life." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the voice recorder. "I think I have a different kind of statement to play for everyone." I held up the recorder. Courtney lunged at me. Her nails were claws aimed at my face. "Give me that," she screamed. But Zeke was faster. He stepped in between us, holding up the Geiger wand like a sword. "Don't touch him," Zeke warned. "He is radioactive, and so are you if you take one more step." Courtney froze. I pressed play. Her voice, Courtney's voice, clear and undeniable, blasted through the silent room from the tiny speaker. "You sold me a fake. I care about the fact that he is downstairs eating bacon and eggs. The thing isn't working. Just get it done tonight. Make it look like a robbery." The recording played on. The confession hung in the air, suffocating her. I stopped the tape. I looked at Mr. Henderson, the notary. "You might want to put that stamp away," I said, "unless you want to notarize a murder confession." Mr. Henderson dropped his stamp and ran for the door. I looked at Jamal. He was on his knees. He was looking at the lead box, then at his wife, then at me. His world was ending, and mine was just beginning. I looked at Courtney. She was cornered. The guests were pulling out their phones, recording. The real estate sharks were backing away, trying to disassociate themselves. "You wanted a party, Courtney," I said. I pointed to the door where the sirens were starting to wail in the distance. Alicia had called them 5 minutes ago. "I hope you like the flashing lights, because the guests of honor are here. And they have bracelets for you too, but they aren't made of gold." I sat down in the nearest chair and waited for the police. The nausea was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the truth, and it was glowing in the dark. The garden was unrecognizable. For 30 years it had been my sanctuary, a place where I grew tomatoes, and Bernice grew her prize-winning roses. It was a place of dirt and worms and honest labor. But today, it looked like the lobby of a hotel I could not afford to stay in. White linen tablecloths covered the rough-hewn picnic tables I had built with my own hands. Crystal flutes sparkled in the afternoon sun, replacing the chipped mugs we used to drink lemonade from. A string quartet was playing in the corner near the tool shed, drowning out the sound of the birds. It was beautiful, in a cold, sterile way. It was a funeral disguised as a celebration. I stood by the French doors watching the guests arrive. They were not my neighbors. My neighbors were working people, people who drove trucks and taught school. These people were sharks. They arrived in European sedans that gleamed like oil slicks. The men wore suits that were too tight, and the women wore smiles that were too wide. They were Courtney's people, investors, developers, flippers, people who looked at a home and saw only square footage and profit margins. I adjusted the cuffs of my suit. It was a navy blue wool suit, slightly out of fashion, with wide lapels, but it was clean and it was paid for. I had bought it for my retirement party from the electric company 10 years ago. It felt like armor. Under the sleeve on my left wrist, the decoy watch ticked steadily against my skin. It was cool and heavy, a constant reminder of the lie I was living and the truth I was about to reveal. Courtney was moving through the crowd like a predator in a tank of decorative fish. She was wearing that blood-red dress, a splash of violence against the white linens. She was laughing, touching arms, clinking glasses. She looked radiant, but I knew better. I had seen her in the hallway earlier, screaming into her phone. I knew that under that layer of expensive makeup was a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. She needed this signature today. She needed the deed to this house before the sun went down, or her life was over. She spotted me standing in the doorway. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes tightened. She broke away from a group of men discussing interest rates and made a beeline for me. "Dad," she said, her voice pitched high enough for people nearby to hear. "You finally came down. Everyone has been dying to meet you." She linked her arm through mine. Her grip was painful. Her fingers dug into my bicep like claws. "Smile," she hissed under her breath, so only I could hear. "Smile, or I swear to God I will put you in a state-run facility so fast your head will spin." I smiled. It was a thin, dry smile, but it was enough for the cameras. "That is better," she whispered. "Now come on. Mr. Henderson, the notary, is set up by the fountain. We are going to do the toast, then the signing. No speeches, no stories. Just sign the damn book." She dragged me into the sunlight. The heat hit me instantly. It was a humid day, the kind of weather that used to make my joints ache. But today, I felt nothing but a cold clarity. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, keeping me sharp, keeping me ready. We walked past Jamal. He was standing near the bar, alone. He was holding a glass of amber liquid that looked like scotch, and he was staring into it as if he could drown himself in the bottom. He saw us approaching, and he looked away. He couldn't look at me. The guilt was eating him alive. He knew what his wife was doing was wrong, but he was too weak to stop it. He was a man who had forgotten how to stand up. Jamal Courtney snapped. "Come here, stand with your father. We need to look like a united front." Jamal shuffled over. He smelled of alcohol and fear. "Hey, Pop," he mumbled. "Hello, son," I said softly. I looked at him, and I felt a wave of sadness. He wasn't evil, he was just lost. He had let a wolf into the henhouse because he liked the way her fur shined, and now he didn't know how to get her out without getting bitten. Courtney positioned us in front of the fountain. The water trickled behind us, a soothing sound that contrasted with the tension radiating from her body. She waved at the musicians. They stopped playing. The sudden silence was heavy. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward us. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. They saw an old black man in a dated suit, standing next to a young, vibrant couple. They saw a relic being dusted off for one last display. Courtney raised her glass. The sunlight caught the champagne, turning it into liquid gold. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice projecting effortlessly across the garden. She waited for the murmurs to die down. She was a performer. She knew how to work a room. "We gathered here today to celebrate a very special man," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "My father-in-law, Cedric Robinson." A polite round of applause rippled through the crowd. I nodded stoically. "Cedric has been the rock of this family for 40 years, she continued. "He built this home. He raised a wonderful son. He served his country and his community. But as many of you know, time waits for no one." She paused, letting a shadow of sadness cross her face. It was perfect acting. "Recently, Dad has been facing some significant health challenges. It has been hard for all of us to watch such a strong man struggle. But in his wisdom, he has decided that it is time to simplify. It is time to rest." She turned to look at me, her eyes glistening with fake tears. "Dad has decided to retire, fully. To move on to a place where he can get the care he needs. And in doing so, he has decided to entrust the legacy of this estate to Jamal and myself, to ensure that what he built continues to thrive." She gestured to the table beside us, where the blue leather folder lay open, waiting. Next to it sat Mr. Henderson, the notary, sweating in his cheap suit, holding his official stamp like a weapon. "So," she said, raising her glass higher, "I would like to propose a toast. To Cedric, to his generosity, to his legacy, and to the future of the Robinson family." To Cedric, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. They drank. Courtney took a long sip, her eyes never leaving my face. She was daring me to speak. She was daring me to ruin the moment. She expected me to be the frail, confused old man I had played for the last week. She expected me to nod, wipe a tear, and sign the paper that would leave me homeless. I looked at the blue folder. I looked at the pen lying across the white paper. I looked at Jamal, who was staring at his shoes. Then I looked at the crowd. I saw the arrogance in their faces. They thought this was natural, the old giving way to the young, the weak giving way to the strong. They didn't know that strength wasn't about youth. Strength was about endurance. I took a breath. I reached out and took the champagne glass from Courtney's hand. She froze. Her eyes went wide. This wasn't in the script. I took a sip. It was cold and dry. Then I stepped forward away from her grip. I stepped into the center of the gathering. I stood up straight. I pulled my shoulders back, cracking the stiffness in my spine. I lifted my chin. I wasn't stooped anymore. I wasn't shaking. I was 6 feet and 2 inches of high-voltage lineman, and I cast a long shadow across the white tablecloths. The crowd went quiet. They sensed the shift. The air in the garden changed. Courtney took a step toward me, her hand reaching out to grab my elbow again. "Dad," she warned, her voice a low growl. "Don't. You are tired. Let's just sign." I turned on her. I didn't yell. I just looked at her. I looked at her with the cold, hard stare of a man who had looked death in the face and sent it packing. "I am not tired, Courtney," I said. My voice was deep and resonant, booming without a microphone. "In fact, I haven't felt this awake in months." Courtney stopped. She saw something in my eyes she hadn't seen before. She saw the trap. I turned back to the crowd. "My daughter-in-law speaks of legacy," I said, holding the glass up. "She speaks of passing the torch. She says I am sick. She says I am ready to rest." I paused, letting the words hang in the humid air. "And she is right about one thing. I do have a gift for my family today." I saw Alicia, my lawyer, step out from behind the rose bushes near the gate. I saw the gate open. I saw the yellow hazmat suit of Zeke shimmering in the distance. I smiled. A real smile. I looked at Courtney, who was now trembling not with anger, but with a dawning primal fear. "You wanted the house, Courtney," I said. "You wanted the assets. You wanted everything that was hidden inside this family." I reached into my pocket with my free hand. "Well," I continued, "I believe in giving people exactly what they deserve." I set the glass down on the table right next to the deed. "Yes," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder. "I have a gift for you, and I think it is time we opened it." Courtney backed away. She knew. Somewhere deep in her lizard brain, she knew that the game was rigged. But it was too late to fold. The cards were on the table, and I was holding the ace of spades. I reached under the table where the white tablecloth draped down to the grass. Hidden there was a heavy canvas bag, the kind used for carrying tools or ammunition. I grabbed the handle and heaved it up. It was heavy. The muscles in my arms strained against the weight, but I didn't let it show. I set the object down on the table, right next to the crystal champagne flutes and the blue leather legal folder. Thud. The sound was dull and heavy. It was the sound of dead weight. It was a box. Not a jewelry box. Not a gift box wrapped in ribbons. It was a dark gray lead container. Scratched. Ugly. Industrial. It looked like something you would find in the wreckage of a power plant, not at a garden party in the suburbs. The crowd stared at it. The chatter died down completely. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Courtney stared at the box. Her face, which had been flushed with anger a moment ago, drained of all color. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. She knew what that box was. She knew because the person she bought the weapon from had probably warned her about shielding. I looked at her. I saw the tremor start in her hands. She gripped her champagne glass so hard I thought it would shatter. "You said you wanted to secure my legacy, Courtney," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You said you wanted to protect what is inside this family." I undid the heavy metal latches on the side of the box. Clack, clack. The sound echoed across the garden. "Well," I continued, "I think it is time we stopped hiding things. I think it is time we showed everyone exactly what kind of heart this family really has." I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of dark foam, sat a watch. It looked identical to the one on my wrist. The same gold rim, the same leather strap, the same vintage Omega face. But to me it looked different. It looked darker. It looked like it was absorbing the light around it. It sat there innocent and silent, but I knew it was screaming. A few guests leaned in, curious. They thought it was another heirloom. They thought it was a symbolic gift. Mr. Henderson, the notary, adjusted his glasses and peered at it. "A timepiece," he muttered, confused. "A lovely vintage timepiece. Is this what we are transferring today, Mr. Robinson?" I didn't answer him. I kept my eyes locked on Courtney. "Courtney," I said softly, "do you recognize this?" She didn't speak. She couldn't speak. Her chest was heaving. She took a step back, stumbling in her high heels. "You told me the watch on my wrist was therapeutic," I said, raising my voice so the people in the back could hear. You told Jamal it helps regulate blood pressure. You said it uses the body's natural energy to heal. I picked up the lead box carefully, keeping the open side facing away from me, facing toward the open air. Is that what you told the man you bought it from, Courtney? Did you ask him for a therapeutic device? Or did you ask him for something else? Courtney dropped her glass. Smash. The champagne spilled onto the patio stones, foaming like acid. Stop it, she whispered. Her voice was a hiss of pure panic. Stop this right now. He is confused. He is having an episode. Someone call an ambulance. She looked around for help, but nobody moved. The guests were frozen. They were watching a train wreck, and they couldn't look away. I am not confused, I said. In fact, I have never been clearer. But I think we need a second opinion. I think we need an expert to tell us exactly what this gift is made of. I looked toward the garden gate. Zeke, I yelled. Come on in. The wooden gate crashed open, and then the screaming started. It wasn't the guests screaming, not yet. It was the visual shock. Zeke marched into the garden, but he wasn't wearing his Sunday best. He was wearing a full-body yellow hazmat suit. He looked like an alien. He looked like a disaster response team of one. His face was hidden behind a full-face respirator mask. His hands were covered in thick black rubber gloves. In his right hand, he held a yellow wand connected to a black box strapped to his chest. The crowd gasped. A woman in the front row shrieked and dropped her purse. People scrambled backward, knocking over their white chairs. What is going on? A man in a suit yelled. Is this a joke? Zeke didn't answer. He walked with a heavy, purposeful stomp. He marched straight through the crowd. People parted for him, diving out of the way, covering their mouths as if he were carrying the plague. He walked right up to the table. He stood next to me, a yellow giant in a garden of delicate flowers. He didn't say a word. He just flipped a switch on the black box on his chest. Click. Static. And then he pointed the wand at the open lead box. He didn't even have to get close. He was 3 feet away when the machine started to talk. It wasn't a tick. It wasn't a beep. It was a roar. Zzzz. The sound was deafening. It sounded like static on a radio turned up to maximum volume, but sharper, angrier. It was the sound of billions of atomic particles smashing into the detector every second. It was the sound of invisible bullets firing in every direction. The guests covered their ears. The sound was physical. It scraped against the nerves. Zeke moved the wand closer to the watch. The machine screamed louder. The needle on the gauge slammed against the red stop and stayed there, vibrating violently, trying to go further than the scale allowed. Get back, Zeke shouted, his voice muffled and distorted by the mask. Everyone get back now. Panic erupted, real primal panic. The wealthy investors, the socialites, the sharks who thought they controlled the world, they all broke. They turned and ran. They scrambled over the rose bushes. They tripped over the white tablecloths. A table was overturned, sending crystal and appetizers crashing to the ground. Radiation, someone screamed. It is radiation. They didn't know what it was, but they knew the sound of danger. They knew that men in hazmat suits didn't show up for birthday parties. Only 3 people didn't run. Me, because I was already dead. Zeke, because he was protected. And Courtney, because she was paralyzed by the weight of her own crime. She stood there alone in the middle of the chaos. The red dress that was supposed to be her armor was now a target. She looked at the machine. She looked at the watch. She looked at me. "Turn it off!" she screamed, hands over her ears. "Turn it off! You are crazy! You are killing us!" Zeke lowered the wand, but he didn't turn off the machine. He let it crackle, a rhythmic, angry warning. I picked up the lead box and snapped the lid shut. The sound died instantly. The silence that followed was even louder than the noise. The guests who hadn't made it to their cars yet stopped at the edge of the garden looking back with terrified eyes. I stepped forward. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the notary who was hiding behind a trellis. "Do not leave," I commanded. My voice was the voice of a foreman, a man used to giving orders over the roar of generators. "Nobody leaves until you hear what this is." I tapped the lid of the lead box. "This is not a watch," I said. "This is a murder weapon." I turned to Courtney. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Inside this box is a core of radium-226, I said, reciting the facts Zeke had taught me. "It is an industrial isotope. It emits gamma radiation. It is used for inspecting welds on pipelines. It is used for medical sterilization. It is not used for jewelry. I took a step toward her. She took a step back, hitting the table. The radiation level coming off this object is 1,000 times the safe limit for human exposure, I said. If you hold it for an hour, your skin turns red. If you wear it for a week, your hair falls out. If you wear it for 3 months like I did, your bone marrow turns to mush, and you die a slow, painful, bleeding death. I paused. I looked at Jamal. He was slumped against the bar, weeping. He knew. He finally understood why I had been sick. He understood why his wife had been so insistent on me wearing the gift. Courtney bought this, I said, pointing a finger at her. She didn't buy it at a jewelry store. She bought it on the black market. She paid $10,000 for it, and she gave it to me on my birthday with a smile on her face. Liar, Courtney screamed. It was a shrill, desperate sound. He is lying. He is senile. He bought it himself. He is trying to frame me because he hates me. I smiled. Is that right, Courtney? I bought it. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the voice recorder. Then why were you on the phone this morning screaming at the seller because it wasn't killing me fast enough? Courtney froze. Her eyes went to the small black device in my hand. I pressed play. The audio was crisp and clear, amplified by the silence of the garden. The thing isn't working. It is a paperweight. My deadline is tomorrow at noon. Just get it done tonight. Make it look like a robbery. The recording echoed off the walls of the house. Every word was a nail in her coffin. Every word was a confession, signed in her own voice. I stopped the tape. I looked at the guests who were now slowly walking back toward us, phones out, recording everything. You wanted a show, I said to them. You wanted to see the Robinson legacy. Well, here it is. This is what greed looks like. It looks like a daughter-in-law who is willing to melt an old man's bones to pay off her gambling debts. I turned to Mr. Henderson, the notary. He was trembling, holding his stamp like a shield. Mr. Henderson, I said, I don't think we will be needing your stamp today, but you might want to call the police, although I think my lawyer already beat you to it. As if on cue, the sound of sirens wailed from the street. Not one siren, many. Police, fire, hazmat. The cavalry was coming. Courtney looked at the gate. She looked at the back fence. She was looking for a way out. Don't bother Courtney, I said. The gates are locked. And Zeke has the key. She slumped. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees on the grass, staining her expensive red dress with dirt. She didn't look at Jamal. She didn't look at me. She stared at the lead box. Why didn't you die? She whispered. It was a question asked to the universe, not to me. Why didn't you just die? Because I said, looking down at her, I have lived through wars. I have lived through storms. And I wasn't going to let a piece of metal and a greedy little girl take me down in my own backyard. I turned to Zeke. Pack it up, soldier, I said. The show is over. Zeke nodded. He picked up the lead box. But the party wasn't over. The real cleaning was just beginning. And the first thing we were going to take out was the trash sitting on my lawn in a red dress. The silence in the garden was brittle. It was the kind of silence that usually comes after an explosion, when the dust is settling and everyone is checking to see if they are still breathing. The radiation alarm had stopped screaming, but the echo of it seemed to hang in the humid air, vibrating against the fine crystal glasses and the silver trays. Courtney stood alone in the center of the patio. Her red dress was stained with grass and dirt from where she had fallen, but she scrambled back to her feet. She was like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted from the lead box to the guests who were huddled near the gate, and finally to me. She wasn't done fighting. I could see it in the set of her jaw. She was a woman who had gambled her entire life on this moment, and she refused to fold, even when the cards were clearly against her. She smoothed her hair back with a trembling hand and pointed a manicured finger at me. "He is lying!" she shrieked. Her voice cracked, breaking the silence like a dropped plate. She turned to the guests, desperately trying to make eye contact with anyone who would listen. "Do not listen to him. He is confused. He has dementia. I told you all he was sick. This proves it. Look at what he has done. He went out and bought some dangerous industrial junk just to ruin my party, just to ruin me." She laughed a high-pitched, hysterical sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Think about it," she pleaded, spreading her hands wide. "Why would I buy something like that? I am a businesswoman. I am a wife. I love him. He is the one who is paranoid. He has been hoarding scrap metal in his shed for years. He probably forgot he had it, and now he is trying to blame me because he is jealous of my success. He is trying to frame me. The guests looked at each other. Uncertainty rippled through the crowd. Courtney was persuasive. She was young, beautiful, and white. I was old, tired, and holding a terrifying machine. For a second I saw the doubt in their eyes. They wanted to believe her, because believing me meant accepting that a monster was living among them. Mr. Henderson, the notary, took a tentative step forward. "Mr. Robinson, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," he stammered. "If you are in possession of hazardous materials—" I didn't let him finish. I didn't get angry. I didn't shout. I just held up the small black voice recorder in my hand. It was a simple device, cheap plastic buttons worn down from use. But in that moment, it weighed more than the lead box. "You say I am the one who bought it, Courtney?" I asked, my voice calm, cutting through her hysteria. "You say I am the one who wanted to hurt myself." I took a step closer to her. She flinched but held her ground. "Then explain why you were so angry this morning," I said. "Explain why you were screaming into your phone when you thought I was in the shower." "I didn't call anyone," she lied. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "I was talking to the caterers. I was checking on the food." I shook my head slowly. "No, Courtney. You weren't talking about food. You were talking about murder." I pressed the button. The sound that came out of the speaker was tiny compared to the roar of the Geiger counter, but it was infinitely more destructive. The quality was tinny, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Courtney, stripped of her charm, stripped of her lies. It was the voice of pure, unadulterated malice. "You listen to me, you son of a bitch." The recording played loud and clear. "I paid you $10,000 for a guaranteed result." Guaranteed. Courtney's face went slack. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the recorder as if it were a snake that had just bitten her. "I don't care about the half-life. I care about the fact that he is downstairs eating bacon and eggs. He looks healthier than he did a month ago." The guests gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the garden. They recognized that voice. They had heard it making toasts just minutes ago. But now they were hearing the venom beneath the sugar. "The thing isn't working. It is a paperweight." "Turn it off," Courtney whispered. "Please turn it off." But I didn't turn it off. I turned the volume up. No, I checked it. I held it in my hand just now. It is cold. It isn't emitting anything. "You sold me a fake. You swapped out the core for a piece of lead, didn't you?" I looked at Jamal. He was standing by the overturned bar table. His face was gray. He was staring at the recorder, his hands shaking violently at his sides. He was listening to his wife discuss the mechanics of his father's death, like she was returning a defective toaster. "My deadline is tomorrow at noon. If I don't have the house by then, I am dead." And then came the knockout blow, the line that would echo in this neighborhood for years to come. "That junk didn't kill the old man. He is like a cockroach. I want something stronger. Send someone over here to finish the job. Make it look like a robbery." Click. I stopped the tape. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't brittle. It was heavy. It was the crushing weight of the truth. I looked at Courtney. She wasn't fighting anymore. The fight had left her body. She stood there, exposed. Every lie she had told, every smile she had faked, every manipulation she had orchestrated lay in pieces around her feet. She looked at the guests. They were backing away from her. Not because of radiation this time, but because of disgust. They looked at her like she was something rotting, something that needed to be buried. I looked at Jamal, my son. He made a sound. It was a low, guttural noise, like an animal in a trap. He walked toward her. His steps were uneven, stumbling. He looked like a drunk man trying to walk a straight line, but he was sober, cold, stone sober. Jamal, Courtney whispered, reaching out a hand toward him. "Jamal, listen to me. It is not what it sounds like. I was stressed. I didn't mean it." Jamal slapped her hand away. He stared at her. His eyes were red, rimmed, wild. "You tried to kill him," he said. His voice was a whisper, a jagged shard of glass. Courtney shook her head frantically. "No, baby, no. I was trying to save us. We needed the money. You know, we needed the money." "You told me he was sick," Jamal said, his voice rising. "You told me the watch was medicine. You told me it would help his heart." He grabbed his own hair, pulling at it as if trying to rip the stupidity out of his brain. I put it on him, he screamed. I held his wrist. I fastened the strap. You made me put the weapon on my own father. Courtney stepped back, afraid of him for the first time. Jamal, please. The loan sharks. They were going to kill you. I did it for you. I did it so we wouldn't die. You didn't do it for me, Jamal roared. He lunged at her, grabbing her shoulders. You did it for the house. You did it for the money. You gambled everything away, and you used my father as a chip. He shook her. I thought we were just putting him in a home, he sobbed. I thought we were just taking control. I didn't know you were murdering him. I didn't know I was helping you kill him. He released her, pushing her away with such force that she stumbled and fell back onto the grass. He turned to me. He fell to his knees. He crawled toward me across the white linen that had fallen on the ground. He looked like a penitent pilgrim. He looked like a broken boy. Dad, he choked out. Pop, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was radiation. I thought she just wanted the deed. I am greedy, Dad. I am weak. I know that. But I am not a killer. I looked down at him. Tears were streaming down his face, dripping onto my polished shoes. I knew he was telling the truth. I knew my son. He was a coward, yes. He was easily manipulated, yes. But he didn't have the stomach for blood. He was the kind of man who would look away while a crime was committed, but he wasn't the kind who could pull the trigger. But that didn't wash the blood off his hands. Get up, Jamal, I said sternly. He shook his head, burying his face in his hands. I can't look at you. Get up, I commanded. He slowly rose to his feet, trembling. He couldn't meet my eyes. You didn't know it was radiation, I said quietly. But you knew it was wrong. You knew she was stealing from me. You knew she was hurting me. And you did nothing. You watched me vomit blood for a month, and you handed me a pen to sign away my home. Jamal sobbed, his body shaking. Ignorance is not innocent, son, I said. You let the wolf in. You fed it. And when it tried to eat me, you held the door shut. I looked over at Courtney, who was sitting on the grass watching us. Her eyes were hard again. She saw that Jamal had turned. She saw that she had lost her last ally. You are pathetic, she spat at Jamal. You are a weak little man. I did the hard work. I made the hard choices. And now you are going to cry to Daddy. I walked over to her. I stood over her, blocking out the sun. You didn't make hard choices, Courtney, I said. You made evil choices. There is a difference. I heard the sirens get louder. They were at the front of the house now. I could hear car doors slamming. I could hear voices shouting commands, police radios crackling. I looked at the gate. 2 uniformed officers ran into the garden, guns drawn. Behind them came men in suits, FBI agents. Alicia had done her job well. She hadn't just reported a theft. She had reported a domestic terror threat involving nuclear material. Police, drop it, the lead officer screamed, pointing his weapon at Zeke. Zeke calmly raised his hands, still holding the Geiger wand. It is secured, he yelled through his mask. The material is in the lead box. The suspect is on the ground. The officers scanned the scene. They saw the terrified guests. They saw the old man in the suit. They saw the woman in the red dress on the grass. I pointed at Courtney. That is her, I said. That is the woman on the tape. The officers moved in. They grabbed Courtney by the arms and hauled her to her feet. She didn't fight. She went limp. But as they cuffed her, she looked at me one last time. This isn't over, old man, she hissed. The debt doesn't go away just because I am in jail. They will come for the house. They will come for you. I leaned in close to her, so only she could hear. Let them come, I whispered. I have a lot of free time now, and I have a very big shovel. They dragged her away. She was screaming obscenities, kicking at the officers, her red dress trailing in the dirt. Jamal stood alone in the middle of the garden. An officer approached him. Sir, we need to ask you some questions, the officer said. Jamal nodded numbly. He held out his wrists. Am I under arrest? He asked softly. Not yet, the officer said. But you need to come with us. Jamal looked at me. He was waiting for me to save him. He was waiting for his dad to step in and fix it, like I had done when he broke the neighbor's window, like I had done when he failed his math test. But I stayed silent. I watched them lead my son away. He walked with his head down, defeated. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It was hot and salty. It hurt more than the radiation burns. Zeke walked over to me. He took off his mask, revealing his sweaty face. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, he said quietly. "You stopped them." I looked at the empty garden, the overturned tables, the spilled champagne, the ruin of what was supposed to be a celebration. "I stopped them, Zeke," I said, "but I lost him." "You didn't lose him," Zeke said. "You just finally stopped carrying him." I nodded. I reached into my pocket and took out the decoy watch. I unbuckled it from my wrist. I looked at it for a moment, then I tossed it onto the table next to the lead box. I was done with watches. I was done with counting time. Now I just had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And the first thing I was going to do was get a really stiff drink. The sound of the sirens was no longer a distant wail. It was a physical wall of noise that crashed over the garden fence. Blue and red lights flashed against the side of my Victorian home, turning the white clappered siding into a strobe light of emergency colors. This wasn't just a patrol car coming to break up a loud party. This was a tactical response. Alicia had used the magic words when she called the authorities. Radiological threat, domestic terrorism, attempted murder with a biological agent. The garden gate didn't just open, it was kicked off its hinges. Men in dark windbreakers with yellow letters on their backs swarmed into the yard. FBI, Department of Homeland Security, local SWAT. They moved with the terrifying precision of a machine designed to neutralize threats. They didn't care about the white tablecloths or the crystal glasses. They trampled the flower beds. They kicked over the expensive chairs. They formed a semicircle around the patio, their weapons drawn and leveled. "Federal agents," one of them screamed, his voice cracking with intensity. "Nobody move! Hands where we can see them!" The guests who had been recording on their phones dropped them and threw their hands in the air, screaming in terror. Mr. Henderson, the notary, was face down in the grass, sobbing into the dirt. But the guns weren't pointed at the guests. They were pointed at the woman in the red dress. Courtney stood alone in the center of the chaos. She looked small against the wall of armed men, but she didn't look surrendered. She looked feral. Her hair was wild, her makeup smeared, and her eyes were darting around looking for an exit that didn't exist. She was a rat in a trap, and she knew the exterminator had arrived. Courtney Robinson, the lead agent, shouted, "Step away from the bag. Put your hands on your head. Do it now." Courtney looked at the lead box sitting on the table, the box that contained the proof of her crime. "It is not mine," she screamed back, her voice shrill and desperate. "I told you, it is his. He is the terrorist. He is the one trying to kill us all. Look at him. He is crazy." She pointed a shaking finger at me. I stood perfectly still, my hands raised calmly to my shoulders. I looked at the agent. I didn't need to speak. Zeke was standing next to me in his hazmat suit, holding the Geiger counter that was still clicking aggressively. The optics were clear. I was the victim. She was the monster. The agents didn't buy her act. They advanced, tightening the circle. "Last warning," the agent yelled. "Get on the ground." Courtney looked at them. Then she looked at Jamal. My son was standing a few feet away from her, paralyzed by shock. He was looking at his wife like he had never seen her before. He was looking at a stranger wearing the face of the woman he loved. "Jamal," she whispered, "help me. Tell them we did this for the family." Jamal didn't move. He shook his head slowly, tears streaming down his face. "I can't, Courtney," he choked out. "You tried to kill my father." Courtney's face twisted. The mask of the loving wife fell away completely, leaving only the ugly, raw desperation of a sociopath. "Fine," she spat. "If you won't help me, you will use me." She lunged. It happened so fast that even the trained agents hesitated. Courtney didn't run away. She grabbed a silver steak knife from the overturned banquet table. And she didn't attack the police. She grabbed Jamal. She wrapped her arm around his neck and hauled him backward, her body pressed against his back. She jammed the tip of the serrated knife against his throat, right under his jaw. "Back off," she screamed, dragging Jamal with her toward the back door of the house. "Back off, or I will open his throat." The garden went deadly silent. The only sound was the clicking of the Geiger counter and the heavy breathing of 50 terrified people. Jamal let out a whimper of pure terror. He stood on his tiptoes, trying to keep his skin away from the blade. His eyes found mine. "Pop," he mouthed. "Help." My blood ran cold. I had planned for everything. I had planned for the police. I had planned for the confession. I had planned for the lawsuit. but I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't planned for her to use my own son as a human shield. "Courtney, stop!" I yelled, taking a step forward. "Stay back, old man," she shrieked, pressing the knife harder. A thin line of red blood appeared on Jamal's neck, running down into his collar. "I swear to God I will do it. I have nothing left to lose. You took everything from me." "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice steady despite the fear hammering in my chest. "You gambled it away. Let him go, Courtney. He is your husband." "Husband?" She laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "He is a liability. He is a weak, pathetic anchor that has been dragging me down for 10 years. She dragged Jamal closer to the door. Her eyes were wild, scanning the agents who were moving to flank her. "I deserve this house," she screamed at the crowd, at the police, at the universe. "I deserve the money. Do you know how hard it is to wait? Do you know what it is like to watch this selfish old man sit on $2 million of equity while we struggle, while we drown in debt?" She looked at me with pure hatred. "You are selfish, Cedric. You are a selfish, hoarding dinosaur. You had your time. Why couldn't you just die? Why couldn't you just get out of the way and let the young people live? We are the future. You are just taking up space." I looked at her. I looked at the entitlement etched into every line of her face. She truly believed she was the victim. She believed that my life was an inconvenience to her lifestyle. "I am not taking up space, Courtney," I said softly. "I am holding the foundation together, and you just tried to blow it up." "Shut up," she screamed. "I want a car. I want a clear path to the driveway. If anyone follows me, he dies." She was losing her grip on reality. There was no escape. The streets were blocked. The air was filled with drones. She was going to prison, but she was determined to take someone with her. I looked at the lead agent. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible signal. He moved his finger slightly. He was waiting for a distraction. I looked at Jamal, my son, the boy I had taught to catch a baseball, the boy I had taught to drive. He was terrified, but I saw something else in his eyes. I saw shame. And beneath the shame, I saw a spark of the anger that he should have felt years ago. "Jamal," I said, clearly locking eyes with him, "do you remember what I told you about handling live wires?" Jamal blinked. It was a strange question, a memory from when he was 12 years old, helping me in the garage. Courtney frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Jamal, remember?" I shouted. "When the wire is live, you don't pull away, you drop." Jamal understood. In the garage, I had taught him that if you grab a live wire, your muscles contract and you can't let go. The only way to break the circuit is to drop your body weight instantly, to force gravity to break the connection. "Drop, son," I roared. "Drop, now." Jamal didn't hesitate. He didn't try to pull the knife away. He simply turned his legs to jelly. He collapsed. He fell straight down dead weight, dragging Courtney's arm down with him. The sudden shift in weight threw Courtney off balance. She stumbled forward, the knife slicing through the air harmlessly above Jamal's head. Pop, pop. Two distinct sounds, not gunshots, compressed air. Two taser probes hit Courtney squarely in the chest. The effect was instant. Her body went rigid, her back arched. The knife flew from her hand, landing in the grass. She convulsed, her muscles seizing up under the 50,000 volts of electricity coursing through her nervous system. She fell. She hit the ground hard, face first into the dirt, her red dress billowing around her like a pool of blood. "Move! Move! Move!" the agents shouted, swarming in. They kicked the knife away. They grabbed her arms and wrenched them behind her back. Courtney let out a scream that wasn't human. It was the sound of a demon being exorcised. "Get off me," she shrieked, kicking and spitting. "I am Courtney Robinson. I am a victim. He poisoned me. It is his fault." The agents didn't listen. They slapped the handcuffs on her wrists. The metal clicked shut, a sound of finality. They hauled her to her feet. She looked destroyed. Her expensive dress was torn and muddy. Her hair was a bird's nest. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks, giving her the look of a skull. She thrashed against them, trying to bite the officer holding her. "You will pay for this, Cedric," she screamed at me as they dragged her toward the gate. "You will rot in hell. I will take the house. I will take everything." I stood there watching her go. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a deep, hollow pity. She was a woman who had been given everything: beauty, health, a family, and she had thrown it all into a furnace of greed, hoping to forge gold. Jamal was still sitting on the grass, rubbing his neck. A thin line of blood was trickling down his collar, but he was alive. An EMT rushed over to him, checking the wound. I walked over. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted. I looked down at my son. He looked up at me. He looked at the police dragging his wife away. He looked at the lead box on the table. He started to cry. Not the silent weeping from before, but loud, racking sobs that shook his whole body. He curled into a ball on the grass, hiding his face from the world. I knelt down beside him. My joints popped. I put my hand on his back. "It is over, son," I whispered. "It is over." Jamal grabbed my hand. He held it like a lifeline. "I am sorry, Pop," he sobbed into the grass. "I am so sorry." "I know," I said. "I know." Zeke walked over, still holding the Geiger counter. He looked at Courtney being shoved into the back of a squad car. "That is one dangerous isotope you had living in your house," said. Zeke muttered behind his mask. "Yeah," I said, watching the flashing lights reflect off the windows of the home I had built. "Radon gas is nothing compared to a bad marriage." The FBI agent approached me. "Mr. Robinson," he said, respectful but firm, "we need to secure the scene. The radiological team is going to sweep the house. We need you to evacuate until we can confirm it is clean." I nodded. "Take your time," I said. "I think the house needs a good scrubbing anyway." I stood up and helped Jamal to his feet. He leaned on me, heavy and broken. "Come on, son," I said. "Let's go." "Where?" Jamal asked, wiping his bloody neck. "Where are we going to go?" "I don't know," I said, looking at the setting sun. "But we are walking out of here on our own 2 feet. And that is a start." We walked out of the garden, past the stunned guests, past the overturned tables, past the ruin of the party. We walked out the front gate, past the police cars and the news vans that were just arriving. We walked down the street, 2 Robinson men leaving the wreckage behind. Courtney was screaming inside the police car, banging her head against the window, but I didn't look back. I listened to the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and strong. I had taken off the watch. I had taken out the trash, and now it was time to take back my life. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers were finally fading into the distance, taking the chaos and the noise with them. The garden was quiet now. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple color that matched the feeling in my chest. The guests were gone. The caterers had fled, leaving behind trays of melting ice and untouched appetizers. The only things left in the yard were the overturned chairs, the ruined white tablecloths, and my son. Jamal stood in the middle of the wreckage. He looked like a statue that had been toppled. His tuxedo was torn at the collar from where Courtney had grabbed him. His neck was still bleeding, a slow trickling line of red that stained his white shirt. He looked small. For 40 years I had looked at him and seen potential. I had seen the future. Now I looked at him and I saw a ruin. He didn't move for a long time. He just stared at the spot on the grass where his wife had been handcuffed and dragged away screaming. He was shivering, even though the evening was warm. It was the chill of shock, the chill of a man waking up from a long coma to find that the world he knew was gone. I walked over to the table and picked up the lead box. I latched it shut. I didn't want the radiation leaking out anymore. I didn't want it poisoning the air between us. The damage was already done. I sat down heavily on one of the white chairs. My legs felt like lead. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the confrontation was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Jamal turned slowly. He looked at me. His eyes were swollen. His face was gray. He took a step toward me, then another. He walked like an old man. He walked like me. When he reached the patio, he didn't sit down. He didn't stand tall. He collapsed. He fell to his knees on the hard stone pavers. The sound of his knees hitting the stone made me wince, but he didn't seem to feel it. He put his hands on the ground and bowed his head. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner's sword. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was broken, a jagged shard of sound. I didn't answer. I just watched him. I watched the top of his head where the hair was starting to thin, just like mine. I watched his shoulders shake. "I didn't know," he said. He said it to the ground. He couldn't look at me. "I swear to you on Mom's grave, I didn't know it was radiation. I didn't know it was a weapon." I took a deep breath. The air smelled of crushed grass and expensive cologne. I believe you, I said. Jamal's head snapped up. He looked at me with a desperate hope in his eyes. You do? He asked. You believe me? Yes, I said calmly. I believe you didn't know it was radium. I believe you didn't know the mechanics of the murder. You are not a killer, Jamal. You don't have the stomach for it. He let out a sob of relief. He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it away. I didn't pull it away in anger. I pulled it away because I wasn't done. I believe you didn't know the weapon, I said, my voice hardening. But that doesn't mean you are innocent. Jamal froze. His hand hovered in the air, reaching for a forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. But I didn't pull the trigger, he pleaded. I was stupid. I was blind. She told me it was for the best. She told me we were drowning, Dad. The debt, the threats. I was scared. Scared, I repeated. I stood up. I loomed over him. You were scared of the loan sharks. You were scared of losing your lifestyle. You were scared of your wife. But you weren't scared for me. I pointed to the house. For 3 months, Jamal, I sat in that kitchen, vomiting blood. My hair fell out on my pillow. I couldn't walk to the bathroom without holding the walls. And what did you do? Jamal looked down, tears dripping from his chin. I asked if you were okay, he whispered. You asked me if I was okay, and then you handed me a pen to sign away my life, I said. You watched your wife treat me like a dog. You heard her call me a burden. You heard her tell the doctors not to save me, and you said nothing. I leaned down close to his face. You say you didn't know it was radiation. Does it matter? If she had been poisoning my soup with arsenic, would you have stopped her? If she had been pushing me down the stairs, would you have caught me? No. You would have turned your head. You would have walked into the other room and turned up the TV so you couldn't hear the bones break. Jamal squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head violently. No, that is not true. I love you, Dad. Love is an action, Jamal, I roared. My voice echoed off the empty house. Love is protection. Love is standing between the monster and the victim. You didn't stand. You knelt. You knelt before her greed, and you let her walk all over me. I stepped back, breathing hard. My chest hurt. You didn't kill me with radiation, son. The radiation made me sick, but my body is strong. It is healing. But the silence. Your silence when she was stripping me of my dignity. Your silence when she was planning my funeral while I was still eating breakfast. That is what killed me. That is the poison that doesn't wash out. Jamal slumped forward, his forehead touching the cold stone. I am sorry, he wailed. I am so sorry. I am a coward. I am a weak, pathetic coward. Please, Dad, just tell me what to do. I will do anything. I will fix this. I will testify against her. I will get the house back. Just don't hate me. Please don't hate me. I looked down at him. I didn't hate him. God help me, I loved him. He was my flesh and blood. He was the baby I had held in the delivery room, promising to keep him safe. And maybe that was the problem. I had kept him too safe. I had shielded him from the hard edges of the world, and in doing so, I had raised a man who had no spine. I don't hate you, Jamal, I said softly. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes again. Then, can I come home? He asked. Can we start over? I have nowhere else to go. She ruined my credit. She took the apartment. The police, they might charge me as an accessory. I need you, Dad. I looked at the house, my sanctuary. It was big enough for 2. It would be easy to open the door. It would be easy to let him in, to let him sleep in his old room, to cook him breakfast and pretend this nightmare never happened. That is what a father does. A father forgives. But I remembered the voice on the recorder. He is a liability. He is a weak, pathetic anchor. Courtney was evil, but she was right about one thing. Jamal was an anchor, and if I let him back in now, he would never learn to swim. He would spend the rest of his life looking for another strong personality, to cling to another host to attach himself to. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. Jamal blinked. No, you can't come home, son. Jamal scrambled to his feet, panic rising in his voice. But Dad, where will I go? I have no money. I have no car. The FBI seized everything. I know, I said. You are starting from zero, just like I did when I came back from Vietnam. Just like your grandfather did when he came to this city with nothing but a toolbox. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a money clip. I peeled off $500. It was all the cash I had on me. I held it out to him. "Take this. It is enough for a motel and a few meals." Jamal stared at the money. He looked insulted. He looked terrified. "Dad, you can't do this. I am your son." "I am doing this because you are my son," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "If I let you back in that house tonight, you will never change. You will always be the boy who hid behind his wife. You will always be the victim." I shoved the money into his hand. "Go, Jamal. Go out there and find out who you are when you don't have a safety net. Get a job, a real job. Use your hands, sweat, pay your own rent, stand on your own 2 feet." "I won't survive," he whispered. "You will," I said. "You are a Robinson. We survive. We always survive. But we don't survive by feeding off others." I turned away from him. I walked toward the back door of the house. "Dad, please," he called out. "Don't turn your back on me." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "I am not turning my back on you," I said over my shoulder. "I am waiting for you. When you can look me in the eye and tell me you are your own man, come back. When you have fixed yourself, come knock on my door. I will be here, but not tonight." I walked up the steps. I opened the screen door. I heard him crying behind me. It was a lonely, desolate sound. It broke my heart to listen to it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run back to hold him, to tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. I stepped into the kitchen and closed the door. I locked it. I stood there in the dark, leaning my forehead against the cool wood of the door frame. I listened to his footsteps shuffling away across the patio. I listened to the gate squeak open and then shut. He was gone. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 years. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the kitchen floor. I buried my face in my hands, and I wept. I wept for the little boy who used to chase fireflies in the yard. I wept for the man who had lost his way. And I wept for the father who had to break his own heart to save his son's soul. The house was empty now. The silence was absolute. But for the first time in a long time, the air felt clean. The poison was gone. The radiation was gone. And the lies were gone. It was just me, just Cedric, and I had a lot of work to do. They say you cannot see radiation. They say it is an invisible killer that stalks you without making a sound. But as I sat on my front porch swing, watching the hazmat team scrub my house, I realized that wasn't entirely true. You can see the effects of it. You can see it in the men wearing yellow suits, carrying black bags out of your living room. You can see it in the caution tape wrapped around the oak tree I planted 30 years ago. And you can see it in the emptiness where a family used to be. The house was being purged. The team from the Department of Environmental Protection was thorough. They were wiping down every surface where that cursed watch had rested. They were removing the linens, the curtains, and the rugs. They were taking away the physical traces of the poison. But they couldn't scrub away the memories. They couldn't disinfect the betrayal that had seeped into the drywall. Zeke sat on the steps next to me. He had finally taken off his yellow suit. He was wearing his old grease-stained coveralls, and he looked like exactly what he was. A tired old soldier who had just fought one last battle. He held 2 cold bottles of beer in his hands. He cracked the caps off using his lighter, a simple, familiar sound. Psh! It was the sound of normal life trying to assert itself over the madness. He handed me one. The glass was cold against my palm. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. "To the victor goes the spoils," Zeke grunted, taking a long pull from his bottle. I looked at the beer. I looked at the flashing lights of the hazmat truck in my driveway. "I don't feel like a victor, Zeke," I said quietly. "I feel like a survivor. And there is a difference." Zeke nodded. He understood. He knew that winning a war often meant standing alone on a pile of rubble. "You saved your life, he said. "And you saved that boy's soul, even if he doesn't know it yet. If you had let him keep going, let him keep hiding behind that woman, he would have rotted from the inside out, worse than any radiation." I took a sip of the beer. It tasted bitter and clean. I looked through the open front door. The house looked huge, empty, without Courtney's clutter, without Jamal's nervous energy, without the constant tension of the last few months. It felt like a cavern. It was a 3-story Victorian, built for a large family, built for noise and laughter and life. Now, it was just me, just an old man and his ghosts. I should be sad. I should be mourning the loss of the future I thought I had. I thought I would grow old here, with grandchildren running up and down the stairs. I thought Jamal would take over the maintenance, fixing the roof when my knees got too bad. I thought I would be the patriarch of a dynasty. But as the wind blew through the porch screen, I realized I didn't feel sad. I felt light. For the first time in 10 years, I could breathe. The weight on my chest wasn't cancer. It wasn't heart failure. It was them. It was the parasites I had allowed to attach themselves to me. Courtney with her insatiable hunger for status. Jamal with his crippling need for approval. They had been draining my blood long before they bought that watch. They had been eating my spirit. I had cut them out. It was a brutal surgery. It left a jagged scar. But the infection was gone. "So what happens now?" Zeke asked, watching the crew carry out the sofa where Courtney used to sit and critique my clothes. "You gonna sell the place? Move to Florida? Get a condo on the beach?" I looked at the house. I looked at the neighborhood. This was a good neighborhood once. Working class, proud, black families who looked out for each other. But lately it was changing. The sharks were moving in, flipping houses, pushing people out. And the kids, the young men I saw walking down the street, they looked lost. They looked like Jamal. They had no skills. They had no direction. They thought the only way to get ahead was to get lucky or to take what wasn't theirs. They were being taught that manual labor was for suckers. They were being taught that success meant a fast car and a suit, even if you had to steal to get it. I shook my head. "No Florida," I said. "I am not going anywhere. This is my home. Bernice is in this soil. I am not leaving her." Zeke looked at me sideways. "It is a lot of house for one man," said. "You going to rattle around in there like a marble in a tin can?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I fill it up again." "Fill it with what?" Zeke asked. "You getting a cat." I smiled. A slow, genuine smile that felt good on my face. Number 1. I am thinking of something bigger. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. I pointed to the large, detached garage in the back. My workshop. "You remember when we came back from the war, Zeke? You remember how lost we were? We didn't know how to fit back into the world." Zeke nodded, looking at his hand. "Yeah, I remember. But we had a trade," I said. "I knew electricity, you knew mechanics. We had something we could do with our hands. We had value. That is what saved us. That is what kept us from going crazy. We built things." I took a swig of beer. "Jamal didn't know how to build anything," I said, my voice thick with regret. "He only knew how to consume. I failed him, Zeke. I gave him things instead of teaching him how to make things. I paid for his college, but I didn't teach him the value of sweat." I turned back to look at my friend. "I am not going to make that mistake again." Zeke put his beer down. He was listening intently now. "I am going to turn this place into a school," I said. "Not a book school, a trade school. The Robinson Center for the Trades." I pointed to the garage. "We knock out that back wall. We put in 4 bays. Auto repair, electrical wiring, carpentry, plumbing." I pointed to the main house. "The living room becomes a classroom. The bedrooms become dorms for kids who have nowhere else to sleep. We take in the boys who are falling through the cracks, the ones the schools gave up on, the ones who are standing on corners, waiting to get into trouble." I looked at Zeke. "We teach them a trade. We teach them how to hold a wrench, how to wire a circuit breaker, how to fix a leaking pipe. We give them a skill that nobody can take away from them. We give them the dignity of earning their own dollar." Zeke rubbed his chin. His eyes were twinkling. "And who is going to teach them?" he asked. I looked at him. "I know a master mechanic who is probably tired of fixing clocks," I said. "And I know a master electrician who has a lot of free time on his hands." Zeke laughed, a dry, rasping laugh. "You are crazy, Cedric. You are 75 years old. You should be resting." "I rested for 3 months," I said, feeling the strength in my arms. "Resting almost killed me. I am done resting. I want to work." I looked at the street where the police car had taken Courtney away. "She called me a selfish dinosaur," I said. "She said I was taking up space. Well, I am going to prove her wrong. I am going to use this space to build an army of young men who know the value of hard work, men who won't let their wives push them around, men who won't need to steal an old man's house to feel like they are somebody." The hazmat foreman walked up to the porch. He held a clipboard. "Mr. Robinson," he said, We are done with the primary sweep. The levels are down to normal background radiation. We removed the contaminated furniture. You are clear to re-enter. It is safe. I nodded. Thank you. I stood up. I finished my beer and set the bottle on the railing. It is safe, I said to Zeke. Zeke stood up and clapped a heavy hand on my back. The Robinson Center, he mused, has a nice ring to it. I walked to the front door. I put my hand on the knob. It was cool and solid. I opened the door and walked into the empty hallway. The smell of bleach was strong, but underneath it, I could smell the old wood, the plaster, the history of the house. I walked into the living room. It was bare. The floorboards gleamed in the setting sun. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I could see it. I could see workbenches. I could see drafting tables. I could hear the sound of laughter and the buzz of saws. I could see the future. I wasn't a victim of attempted murder. I was a man who had been given a second chance, a wake-up call. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. Jamal was out there somewhere, walking alone in the dark. I hoped he would find his way. I hoped the $500 would last long enough for him to find his pride. And maybe one day, years from now, he would come back. He would walk into this house not as a beggar, but as a man. And I would be here waiting, with a hammer in my hand, ready to put him to work. But until then, I had a legacy to build. A real legacy. Not one made of money and paper deeds, but one made of sweat skills and self-respect. I turned away from the window. Zeke came in behind me, carrying his tool bag. "Where do we start, Sid?" he asked. I looked at the wall that separated the kitchen from the dining room. Courtney had always hated that wall. "Pass me the sledgehammer, Zeke," I said, rolling up my sleeves. Zeke handed me the heavy iron hammer. I weighed it in my hands. It felt good. It felt honest. I swung it with all the strength I had left. Crash. The plaster exploded. Dust filled the air. It was the best sound I had heard in years. "We start right here," I said, preparing for the next swing. "We tear down the old to build the new." I swung again. And again. I wasn't dying. I was just getting started. 6 months is a long time when you are waiting for an echo, but it passes in a blink when you are building something new. The house on the hill doesn't smell like bleach anymore. It smells like sawdust and soldering iron smoke. It smells like engine grease and strong coffee. It smells like hope. I stood in what used to be my formal dining room. The crystal chandelier was gone, replaced by industrial track lighting. The mahogany table where Courtney had tried to steal my life was gone, replaced by 4 sturdy workbenches. At the bench nearest the window, a 14-year-old boy named Marcus was staring at a tangled mess of copper wire. He was frowning, biting his lip in concentration. He reminded me of myself 60 years ago. He reminded me of Jamal, before the world got its hooks in him. "Don't force it, Marcus," I said, gently leaning over his shoulder. "If you force the connection, you strip the threads. You have to feel it catch." Marcus looked up at me. His hands were rough, covered in calluses from just 3 weeks of work. He adjusted his grip. He slowed down. He twisted the wire nut with patience. "Like this, Mr. Said?" he asked. I watched as the connection tightened, perfectly secure and safe. "Exactly like that," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You got the touch, son." Zeke walked in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He was whistling. Zeke never used to whistle. He looked 10 years younger. "Mail call, said," he said, tossing an envelope onto my workbench. "It is postmarked from Ohio." I looked at the envelope. It was plain white, cheap. The handwriting was familiar, but different. It wasn't the looping cursive Jamal used to use when he was signing checks he hadn't earned. It was jagged, hasty. The handwriting of a man who worked with his hands and was too tired to worry about penmanship. I picked it up. It felt light. I opened it. There was no long letter, no excuses, no pleas for money. Just a single sheet of notebook paper and a check. I unfolded the check first. It was for $50. It was a cashier's check from a local bank in Cleveland. I looked at the note. "Dad, I got a job on a framing crew. It is cold up here and the work is hard. My hands are blistered and my back hurts every morning, but I sleep at night. I really sleep. I don't need pills and I don't need wine. This is the first $50 I saved after rent and food. I know it is not much. I know I owe you millions in heartache. But this 50 is clean. Nobody gave it to me. I didn't steal it. I hammered 5,000 nails to get this. I am not ready to come home yet. I am still fixing the foundation, but I wanted you to know that the anchor is starting to swim. Love, Jamal. I stared at that $50 check. To anyone else, it was gas money. To me, it was the most valuable piece of paper I had ever held. It was worth more than the deed to the house. It was proof of life. My son was out there in the cold, sweating, bleeding, and becoming a man. He was finally learning the lesson I should have taught him years ago. That dignity isn't something you buy. It is something you build. I folded the note and put it in my pocket, right next to my heart. Zeke was watching me, a small smile playing on his lips. "He is doing okay," Zeke asked. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "He is framing houses," I said. "He says his back hurts." "Good," Zeke laughed. "A sore back is good for the soul. It keeps you honest." I looked around the room. There were 6 boys in the program now. 6 lives that were being steered away from the cliff. We were teaching them trades, yes, but we were also teaching them how to be men. How to look someone in the eye. How to keep a promise. How to protect the weak instead of preying on them. The front door opened and Alicia walked in carrying a box of donuts. She was our legal counsel, but she spent more time here eating donuts and giving the boys advice on how to avoid trouble than she did in her office. "Courtney's appeal was denied," Alicia said, grabbing a glazed donut. "The judge wasn't impressed by her claim that she was the victim of a conspiracy. She is going to serve the full 15 years. Attempted murder, domestic terrorism, and fraud. She won't see the outside of a cell until she is 50. I nodded. I didn't feel happy about it. I just felt a sense of closure. The storm had passed, and the wreckage had been cleared away. I walked out onto the porch. The sun was high in the sky. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. I looked down at my wrist. The decoy watch was gone. The radioactive watch was gone, buried in a hazardous waste facility somewhere in the desert. In their place was a black plastic Casio. I had bought it at the drugstore for $12. It had a rubber strap. It beeped on the hour. It wasn't gold. It wasn't vintage. It wasn't a status symbol. But as I watched the digital seconds tick by, I smiled. 10:32 and 15 seconds. 10:32 and 16 seconds. It was accurate. It was honest. And most importantly, it was mine. My time didn't belong to a loan shark. It didn't belong to a greedy daughter-in-law. It didn't belong to a guilt-ridden son. It belonged to me. I had fought for these seconds. I had walked through fire and radiation to keep them, and I was going to spend every single one of them doing exactly what I wanted to do. Building, teaching, living. I looked back inside where Marcus was showing another boy how to strip a wire. "Mr. Said," Marcus yelled, "Come look at this! I think I fixed it." "I am coming, Marcus," I yelled back. I touched the cheap plastic watch one last time. Tick, tick, tick. The sound wasn't a countdown anymore. It was a heartbeat, and it was strong. Life teaches us that not every gift comes wrapped in good intentions. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones waiting for our time to run out, so they can claim what isn't theirs. But remember, a watch only measures time. It doesn't control it. Your life belongs to you until the very last second. Don't let guilt or family pressure speed up your clock. Trust your instincts, value your dignity, and never be afraid to remove the things or the people that are secretly poisoning your soul. True love protects your time. It doesn't steal it. If you enjoyed this story and you believe that it is never too late to take back control of your life, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut someone off to save yourself? I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart strong.